Hey everybody! This is Death by D4, and welcome to my Q&A livestream for April 2021, which also happens to be the 1-year anniversary of the entire channel. Hey, look at that, fancy stuff! About as fancy as I can possibly get actually doing this kind of kind of setup for a live stream. But hey, I hope everybody's doing well on this fine Saturday afternoon. At least it's Saturday where I am. I'm gonna say otherwise for anybody else anywhere else in the world, it's some crazy time zone. So remember that I actually need to drink water because I am a human being. But yeah, similar to last time I did a Q&A live stream, if you guys want me to answer any of your questions that you have about general D&D stuff, usually. Actually, let me see, do I actually have a pop-up here for this? I think I do. Hello, look at that. You just type Q, colon before your question, and I'll get to it right away. Seemed to work pretty well last time we did this. But as before we get to answering anybody's questions, I'm trying to think to myself, like, what can I talk about in the meantime? I actually had the same problem with it last time I did my Q&A live stream, that I had to think about what to actually do just in case I didn't have any questions right away. And part of me was kind of going like, I don't know, can I rant about what I went on about in my Discord yesterday about monster creation being really annoying? Sounds like a Showtime voice even in a live stream. I mean, I will when I'm like rehearsed, and it's usually I rehearse like going like, how do I start the stream kind of thing. But beyond that, it's like just being like, just be loud, confident. You'll sound like you know what you're doing that way. I am somewhat used to doing live streams, admittedly. Like before I did the whole Death by D4 stuff, I used to do stuff on YouTube and Twitch, like on an old channel from years back. So at least it's not the first time you're doing this sort of stuff. But yeah, like when I was ranting yesterday about monster creation on my channel, I was talking mostly about just doing the math side of everything, because like, I genuinely was going like, I talked to some people there and I was like, is there anybody who talks about like the actual math that goes into creating monsters from stat blocks? And most people go like, no, not that I'm aware of. And I'm like, man, I really need to make a video on that. Because the math side of stat blocks is super annoying. Even I thought I was doing it right for a while, and then after like going through sessions and doing through actual practice of it, I realized, no, my math is still off, and it's such an obnoxious thing to try and deal with, because it's like, oh yeah, the balance between like the creature's roll to its AC versus its hit points versus the damage output and the chance to hit, and as well as its abilities, all have to be taken into massive weights of consideration, depending on what monster is trying to do what at what level, and it's super annoying. You did some cool rants the other day? Yeah, I mean, amongst other things as well. I mean, it was just sort of like, I was on Mountain Dew and a burger last night, and that's basically what the kind of energy I was going off of. Severus, hey, welcome. And I know there's a whole bunch of you guys that lurk around in the Discord and stuff like that, and it's totally fine. I'm still happy to have you guys around, even if you just poke your heads in every once in a while. But yeah. The only thing I can really talk about when it comes to like just me and D&D lately is that I went through a bit of a funk during like the downtime between my last big outflow of videos that I was making up for myself and when I had to start making videos again, which I have. I've got another couple of videos prepared for the next like month. I went through a bit of a funk with D&D where I wasn't sure why, but I hated it at the time being, and I wasn't working on any videos specifically because I didn't want that to reflect on the video quality that I was trying to produce at the time. And it ended up being the fact that it wasn't me having a funk with D&D at all, because I got back into the funk, or the rhythm of it really easily. It was the fact that I was so exhausted from work from like the months prior, like leading out of January going through February and March, because I was getting worked really hard during certain weeks, that I was so exhausted that I literally was like, had no energy to do anything. Is that really the reason why I refuse to DM? I can make stories, I can improv, and I've helped a few people there, but I'll be dead before I even have a high tier math for it. To be fair, when it came to me in math in high school, and I say this only because I didn't go to university, I went to a specific tech school to do animation, which is, you know, what I got into professionally. When I went through high school, I was a pretty good student in general. Like, I usually got B's, A's without even needing to study or try. But math was a class that I was pretty genuinely okay in. But when it came to math, there was only one subject of math I was absolutely terrible with, and that was anything to do with a circle. For some reason, my brain just did not click with doing any math that involved a circle, and I was trash at it. But when it came to probability, which was the subject that I had that was the last of the year right before we went to the finals, we had the circle geometry right beforehand, and I was tanking that really badly. And I was like, damn, my grade actually dropped quite significantly, and I wanted to get an A average, because if I did, I got to skip the final test. And I did so well in probability, because that's something I'm actually good at, that I was able to skip it in the end. I just barely squeaked by with like an 80. I needed 86%, and I think I got like an 88, so I like barely got away with it. But even still, like, that's definitely helped me a whole lot going into D&D when it comes to doing that, because like I can do like math calculations on like, there's a website I use called AnyDice that does a lot of that kind of stuff really quickly for you as well, just to learn like averages of dice and probability that way. And I know roughly going like, okay, there's this percentage of chance for this, and I go off of that. But the thing is, players are such an anomaly and a variable that no consistency you make with your monster's design will ever really translate over to every single party composition. You really have to cater everything, especially when you're homebrewing it, to specifically the players that you have, and that's super annoying. Anyway, here we go. Our first question. What would you like to see out of the Ravenloft book in a few weeks? Oh man, I keep forgetting that book is coming out, and I'm super excited for it actually, because Gothic horror is like my jam. I'm super big fan of like Castlevania and all that stuff. So like all of that in there is something I'm looking forward to. I mean, one of the few adventure books I've genuinely got is Curse of Strahd, because I've just heard it's really good. Also, it's like super my thing. The one thing I'm hoping for, and I'm pretty certain we're confirmed on that, is that I want the Undead Warlock to be in there as a subclass, because the Undying is trash. I've done a video on the Undying on this channel, and the Undying is absolutely one of the worst subclasses. I think there was a comment on that video, and I 100% agree with it, that it's like playing a Warlock without a subclass. That's how worthless that subclass is. And this one just completely fits into that slot and does everything it needs to. And I love the UA version, except for the fact that the ability to basically double the damage of Eldritch Blast is a little absurd. I think that they're gonna nuke that down to once a turn it gets to increase the damage. But aside from that, every other featured how is amazing. I'm super looking forward to that. The Spirits Bard, if we get that in there as well, I believe those are the two that might appear in that book. I'm also super forward because the flavoring and the mechanics that go behind Spirits Bard is amazing. But the one thing I completely forgot about until I saw some of the adverts for it was the monsters that are going to be going into it. And I saw like there's this one that's like the Nightmare is like the flaming fiendish horse, but there's a Nightmare that has a headless horseman riding on top of it. I was like, oh man, I forgot there's going to be some really cool monsters in there. So I'm super looking forward to like looking through the book and ripping off a whole bunch of the monsters in there, because I absolutely love Gothic horror that way. I don't know about the setting. I'm not super familiar with the actual settings of the Forgotten Realm and anything else around it, but I do like to read through it for a lot of like my own inspirational material for what I want to draw off of. And monsters and subclasses, definitely like the highest tier stuff. I don't even know if there's gonna be magic items in there, but if there are, I hope it's like, I think they mentioned there will be like these big cursed artifacts. I love that stuff. Detrimental or like gambling items I think are super fun to play with. Mountain Dew, man, it reminds me of my first campaign when I had some buddies IRL pizza and Mountain Dew every Sunday. Good times. That sounds like the exact kind of thing you have when you're like your late teens, early 20s when you're playing D&D with the boys. Hey, Helge, welcome to the stream. I had a party with no advantage somehow, rolled 5 nat 20s and the first 2.5 rounds, so I understand. Yeah, I think I've mentioned this story on my channel as well, and I don't know if I'll tell it as a proper full-on story, but the very first session of D&D I ever ran as a DM, which was like my 4th session ever playing D&D, my players got into a situation where they were making camp for the evening, and they decided what they were going to do was that they were going to, some of them wanted to stake out in a tree. I don't know why. They just did. They just wanted to sleep in a tree because I think they wanted to be off the ground in case anything came after them. So they all made checks to climb the tree. Every single one of my players, all 3 of them, because I had 3 back then, I believe, rolled natural 20s for acrobatics to climb the tree, and I was gobsmacked. I thought that was absurd. I was like, how in the... Anyway, there had to be one, especially during my very first session ever, like a story like that. It was great. That is to say, I've also shared the story about the one time where I had a player try and save the life of one of his teammates from the evil villain when he was about to basically power word kill them. and I gave him a chance to push his friend out of the way to sacrifice himself instead, and he tried to do it. And I gave him, because I said, like, as you're doing it with the surprise element, I said, I'll give you advantage on the athletics check to push your friend out of the way. And even with advantage, he rolled 2 natural ones. And he had to use his inspiration die to be able to fix that correction. But I mean, like, everybody like lost their stuff. Like, everyone just felt like the whole mood just dropped the room. They're like, oh my god, are we about to lose 2 people now? Gothic style one shot? Absolutely. I've actually had one of my mods, who's a long friend of mine for a number of years. He has been waiting for me to run a Bloodborne style one shot for like the longest time, and I absolutely am in the mood to try and do that. So maybe when the Ravenloft book comes out, if I can get some really good inspiration from stuff in there, I'll probably actually do that eventually. Think the race stuff from the UA a few months ago with the Dhampir will make it in? Oh yeah, absolutely. I forgot about that as well. There's Dhampir, Reborn, and Hexblood, and I think all of that's going to make it in there. Now, I'm trying to remember specifically what about it, because I filled out the survey. I've started doing that now because I genuinely care about the material that goes into this stuff. About what I said about each one. The Dhampir, I think, is fantastic. The only thing I think that people pointed out that's a little bit absurd is the fact that you can Paladin Smite with your bite attack, and since you heal for the... Oh my god, sorry. I just drank a bunch of water and I had some food like a little bit ago, sorry. When you bite with the Dhampir's bite attack, since it qualifies for the ability for you to use Divine Smite 4, and you heal for the full amount damage that you deal, that's ridiculous. That allows you to, like, nuke the crap out of somebody and heal for a ton of HP with your bite attack, and that should not be a thing you should be able to do with it. Like, I get it that, like, there's going to be some way that they're going to tweak it where specifically it doesn't qualify for certain things, but it does for others. But the other thing that I mentioned to them, or in the survey, was the fact is that you can convert that to healing, or you can convert that to a bonus to your attack roll. And could you imagine dealing like 1,000,000 damage and then getting a bonus to your attack roll that was like plus 20? That's absurd, and it should not be a thing that you do, because that could be massively exploited, especially because you could not, it's not like, oh, you bite like once or twice every day. It's like, no, you can do this like proficiency bonus long rest. No, that's not okay. That's up to 6 times when you get up to high levels. The Hexblood, if I remember correctly, the only thing I said about it that I didn't like was the token where you rip off a part of your body and it becomes like a sensory token that you can scry through, basically. The reason I said that that wasn't good enough the way that it was because the specific situation where you could be able to use that as an ability during a session or a one-shot or a campaign or what have you is way too niche, because it's specifically, like, there are so many other abilities that allow you to communicate with somebody that you want to communicate with, like an ally, but to be able to spy on somebody, that requires you getting the item into their possession for you to be able to spy on them, and then you have to use the ability at the right time to be able to learn anything actually valuable out of them. Basically, it's way too niche. Like, it would have to be like, oh, you're just happened to get this on there an incredibly lucky chance, and then you scry on it an incredibly lucky chance to be able to use it in an effective way. And even still, it's a completely roleplay element item. It really needs to be in a way that's more practical, is all I said. Reborn, I think, was totally fine otherwise, because I actually liked it. It was like a really good way to flavor in, like, not just reanimated people and such like that. It was a good way to put in, like, constructs, like living dolls or Frankenstein kind of monsters. And I love having that kind of stuff in there. People said it's very similar to Warforged, but it leans a little bit away from, like, basically the power gain that the Warforged has into something that's a little bit tamer, and I think that's fine. That one I think was like a good match, whereas it didn't have anything specifically wrong with it. But I'm super looking forward to all of that because, like, I have my own homebrew undead race that I've been working on in the background for a while. It needs to be completely reworked because things have changed over the years and I haven't stared at it in like 3 years. But it was called a refate, and it was basically, I believe that was the Greek term for a shade, basically. And that was the kind of thing that I was going off. It was supposed to be a very lightweight, physically really detrimental race, but it gave you a lot of abilities for fast mobility and life drain. Couldn't get the balance with it quite right, but I want to eventually. And, like, hey, I'm all for that kind of stuff. I love super edgy, evil looking stuff like that. It's kind of hard to play with it as a player, but it's really fun still. Anyway, back over here. Played with my group last night and I had crap rolls the whole session. Then right as the last enemy and the last encounter were booking for it, I rolled 2 nat 20s on a reaction shot for both of them. PogChamp. That reminds me, actually, that I had a one-shot where... this will probably be a story I do tell on my channel, so I'm not going to spoil all of it, but there was a final encounter that I had in one of my one-shots. It was a really long one. We went for like 9 hours. And the villain went to run, and the villain was hysterical, so I made them like run away from 3 people and past a 4th, and to be able to escape, because they were just going beelining it straight for the exit. And all 3 people made opportunity attacks and missed. And I went, really? It's going to come down to this last person they're going to run past to be able to catch them. And I think they matched the AC. So like the villain was like 1 hit from death and they went running on their turn instead. And they dodged 3 out of 4 opportunity attacks and then got barely hit on the 4th. I was like, God damn, that's way too close, especially because this villain got away. Like it wouldn't have changed the outcome really of the one shot, but it would have left a really sour taste in everybody's mouth. I've had a barbarian friend that's rolled 2 nat 1s on advantage maybe 3 or 4 times. Oh, with the reckless attack? That just feels terrible. When you reckless attack and you still miss is like the worst feeling in the whole world. I've been there. Congratulations on the 1-year anniversary. Thank you very much, Casper. I will admit, if you guys look at when the date on my channel was created, you'll notice that it was actually like way before prior the release of my first video on the channel. And that was because I knew what I wanted to do and I wanted to try and commit to it well in advance. So I nabbed up the all of the names for Death by D4 when I came up with the channel name, like way in advance. So that way I was like, okay, good. I've got the channel names. Like there's nothing wrong with it. There's it's not going to disappear. I'm not going to go like, oh, I'm going to need this name on another account later and it's going to randomly have to be like something else. So I basically just locked down the channel name for myself like months in advance. And then I did all my research and did all my prep for the channel and then launched everything like several months later, which I believe was, it's not technically today, but it's like within a day or 2 of today. And since I can't stream any other day, it's just going to be like today for the celebration smile. But yeah, once again, for anybody, because I'm out of questions right now, if you have a question for me about anything D&D related, just type Q colon into the chat and just tell me whatever you would like to ask me. Otherwise, I'm just going to end up rambling for a little bit right now. I will admit, when it comes to like gothic horror, I do really super enjoy it. And the one thing I was kind of leaning on for a little while is the is Lovecraftian horror as well. I know it doesn't fully sit into that, but come on, Bloodborne is one of my favorite games that has Lovecraftian and like Victorian style gothic horror in there as well. And super happy with the Fathomless. I actually didn't super look into the Fathomless until I did my subclass guide for it, and I actually quite like it, and I would super enjoy playing it. If I had the ability to play Davrian as one in the initial side instead of a great old one, I super would have done that too. And probably not have been so concerned of changing him to a Fiend Warlock later. Then again, he was mostly a sorcerer as time went on, but still. When it comes to Lovecraftian horror, I mean, I've mentioned it before. There is a Kickstarted book, I believe, and I forget the guy's name who does it. He's one of the big guys who's made lots of D&D Lovecraftian style books in the past, and he's also one of the Doom level designers. Really should remember his name. He's made a book that he released about 2 or 3 years ago called Cthulhu Mythos for 5e, and it is an amazing book. You can probably find it in actually your hobby stores if you actually go looking for it, because I've seen it in hobby stores, and it's an actually amazing Lovecraftian supplement for 5e. Highly recommend it, especially because like, let alone for like the amount of work that went into it and like the sheer volume of stuff that's in it, because it's a huge book. The quality of like the art and the actual stuff that went into it is super, super good. It's got a lot of fun things, including like Lovecraftian races you can play as. There's like the serpent person that can have like 4 arms. It's really fun. Honestly, I'm only ever good if I'm ever 1v1 against something in 3 of my character's size, or I'm rolling an attack of opportunity. Otherwise, my attack rolls are garbage. I will admit I have only played in like a few one-shots over the last like couple of years, and I found that like for the most part I get pretty lucky. But when I was like playing as like any character that's not like really min-maxed really hard, my consistency drops off super far. When I was playing as Davrian, like even though he had like maximized charisma, I found that like my Eldritch Blasts were still missing like quite often, and I was like, oh my god, why? There's actually a famous point near the end of the campaign, right around the time when we got our main villain that got established in that campaign, where I was in a combat encounter where I basically nearly killed myself to save the life of one of our party members. Like I goaded a bunch of enemies into attacking me instead of the person who was about to die. And then I cast shield and got crit 3 times. It was ridiculous. When that happened, I was out of spell slots after that. I was really low in HP, and I could only Eldritch Blast. It was like the only thing I had left. And we found out what the AC of the enemies we were fighting were, and there was like 5 of them. And they had tons of HP, from what we could tell. I had a 75% chance of missing them. I only had a 20 or 25% chance of actually hitting the enemy. So at that point, I ran. I ran from combat. I was like, I'm gonna die. So I ran away from combat and I ditched my party there. And the only reason things worked out was because when I ran, I kited 3 of the enemies with me, which left only 2 in the room with the rest of the party, which they were able to take care of on their own afterwards. And I was able to juke them elsewhere in the dungeon and actually came back. And I was just like, okay, well, we'll take care of that problem later when we come back to it. But like, oh my god, that was like one of the only. But the thing is, like, most of my friends were like, "Are you really gonna ditch us right here?" I was like, "How? What am I supposed to do? I can't do anything to these enemies. They have like over 100 HP, and I have a 25% chance to hit, and do like what, 20 damage at most. It was never gonna work." Question, do you feel that D&D is a strong bias towards cats? I've got both Tabaxis and Lionins, but where are my fox race? Okay, you're not the only person I know that's concerned with like I believe it's Kitsune, if that's the pronunciation for it. Because my DM actually had a merchant that was a Kitsune when I played with my campaign with Davrian. So I know that like people want that kind of thing to be in there. If anything, I know that the Forgotten Realms in its generalness, there's a continent off to like the east or southeast that's supposed to be a Eastern world style area of the realm, I believe. But the thing is, none of the books or any of the materials have gone there yet. So I feel like when we eventually go there, we're probably going to see like a Kitsune monster or race of some kind. I mean, there's no way that people aren't aware that like basically animalistic races have a place in being in 5e and people have an interest in that kind of thing. And just saying that like, oh, you could just reflavor a lot of things like the shifters especially into being that kind of stuff just mechanically doesn't really do any of that justice. So will that probably be a thing? Absolutely. But I highly suspect it won't happen for a while until we get to something like that, at least for something as specific as a Kitsune race like that. Cats, definitely. But I mean, cat people are like really popular. You probably don't need me to tell you that. I mean, gosh, imagine if demon people were popular, Keck W. Love Torian are Vic Raftian. Wow, that's a word. I just like to call it like Bloodborne style stuff because that's just the best combination I've ever seen of Gothic and Lovecraftian horror. Especially because the fact is you don't know it's Lovecraftian until like partway into the game, and then you're just like, what the hell's going on kind of thing. It's very fun. By the way, for anybody that remembers that I bought that Bloodborne Kickstarted board game and I posted it on the channel a while back, I still have yet to play it. We have it up in storage right now. We actually found a place to keep it, but yet to play it. I'm actually watching some videos every once in a while trying to learn how to play it because it's a bit of an uphill learning curve. Question, what is your view on the Blood Hunter and which is your favorite subclass for it? All right, I actually did look into the Blood Hunter because I had a player who started as a Blood Hunter he started as a fighter and he transitioned into a Blood Hunter in my very first campaign. Now, that wasn't the new one that came out in 2020, the revamp that actually made it work a lot better. It was like the older version from the original release that was a lot harder to actually make function, especially when you multiclassed with it. But the Blood Hunter, in my opinion, at least the new version of it, is very fun. And I do think that it does enough core things differently with its class to make it warrant being its own class versus a subclass, mainly because of the fact the main level ups that you get throughout the course of the class between the Blood Rites, the Maledicts, and I believe there's the other main core feature of it as well, which I forget, all work substantially differently. And the fact that you're burning down HP to be able to exploit enemy weakness and like basically strategically change not necessarily the conditions of the battlefield, but you're changing the conditions of your encounter versus the one particular thing you're trying to take down, which is very Witcher-esque style. And I think that's a very like, imagine it's like being like a rogue where it's your job is really to really burst down one target at a time. But in this case, it's more like your job is like to be sort of like that on a ranger-esque kind of level where it's like the burst damage is like toned back quite a bit, but your utility and detrimental effects is stacked up to give you that kind of offensive advantage. When it comes to the subclass, I will admit I'm very unfamiliar with them. I know there's like Ghostwalker, the Mutant, and Profane Soul, and that basically gives you like the generalist, like the Spirit Realm one that's sort of like the generalist to the actual class. Then there is Profane Soul, which I believe is like the Warlock version of it, and then there was Mutant, which is like the very Witcher kind of lycanthrope one. which I believe the Lycanthrope one is the most uphill one to learn and actually build for. But I think it's quite fun, and I think it has a huge amount of customization, which I love, which is like one of the reasons why Warlock is my favorite class. But I think in general, if you're just going to play it as itself, I think the Ghost flavor one is by far the easiest one to get into, especially because the fact is that then your blood curses work on creatures that don't have blood, and you are very good against undead itself, which just means that, like, hey, look, most things that you could end up fighting in most any dungeon are now things that you can actually properly fight. You weren't specifically referring to the Kitsu, but more general canine races. Yes, that's true. I keep forgetting that people in my Discord have voiced a whole lot that people want a proper Lycan race. And specifically when I say Lycan, I mean like werewolf-style race. And it is kind of weird that we have feline races, but we don't have a dog race yet. And I don't know where they would go specifically to have a dog race in D&D. Because it's not like... It's not just wolves. I mean, like, you could go with different breeds of dogs as well to try and get them in there. But I have literally zero knowledge in the back of my mind of, like, where to really go with that. I mean, part of me goes, like, with the Faerun stuff that's been coming out of the UA, you know, the Feywild races that we got with, like, the owl folk and such like that. You could have, like, a blink dog race, because I believe blink dogs are from the Feywild. Which would be kind of, like, weird to be, like, this weird, spoopy, teleporting dog that goes in and out of, like, daylight between realms. It'd be kind of, I think, hugely detrimental, but it would be very funny nonetheless. But I think that the one thing everybody wants is a proper, like, wolfine or wolfine race. And that would be extremely fun, I feel. And you could probably do it with a nice sort of, like, the way I feel like it's like you lean more into the physical prowess side, sort of like the Lionett and the Minotaur races. Or you make it go into the high agility kind of thing. Because I remember, like, that's the main difference in, like, Diablo 2, when you had, like, the wolf and the bear forms for the druid class. The wolf was supposed to be the high speed and multi-attack hit versus, like, the tanky and the raw one-hit power of the bear. The only downside is I believe the bear was ultimately more useful because of the fact that it could actually tank, which is what you really needed that role to be able to do, I believe. Because I don't think the offensive multi-hit power of the wolf scaled really well in the late game. Question, have you seen the new Colossal Tiamat mini WizKids is making? Yes, I have seen that mini. Oh my god, what? That mini is absurd. Like, isn't it like multi-hundreds of dollars as well? It looks amazing, but it looks so overkill. I mean, like, I've seen some of the bigger minis as well, especially because, like, when I got out of Warhammer 40k, I got out of it just before the big change happened where they started bringing in those Titan-class minis that were, like 12 inches tall, and that's what that's kind of giving me reminiscence of. It's like minis that are like of that absurd scale and size. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my god, if you're running like Rise of Tiamat, which I know is a very like easy, like you want to be able to go seamlessly from Mines of Phandelver through to Horde of the Dragon Queen to Rise of Tiamat for this super long-term campaign that you could go through with your players. Works really well from what I've told, especially if you cut out the chunks that you don't need. Then that mini could be super fun to have for like a big finale with all your players to make for some really memorable final battle encounter. But, sorry, I'm just looking at it. It's $400. Holy crap, that is way too much money for a mini like that. I mean, like, at that point, would you even play with it? I feel like at that point, it's just a statue that you'd keep in your house for like, hey, I'm a big D&D nerd and I want to be able to just flex my D&D nerd muscles, therefore just buy Tiamat statue. It's absurd. It looks amazing. Don't get me wrong. But, like, it's for a mini, that's absurd. It kind of reminds me of some of the stuff that my fiance's bought. She's bought a lot of anime figures over the years. We have a lot of the big giant Overwatch ones. And we have like, let me look over here, it's on the side. So like 6 of them. And kind of like sad now because of the fact that she's not super into Overwatch anymore. But the statues are fantastic. So I at least get like the memorabilia side of things that way. Super into it. The only one anime figure I have, I'm not going to say out loud because it might be an anime girl that like I'm a degenerate over, but that's fine. I had to get one just so that way I could just fill the meme. Besides, you're probably not going to know who the character is. Question, have you read The Weekly Roll? It's a D&D comic and the jokes are spot on. I do not recognize the name of The Weekly Roll. If it's the kind of thing I see posted in the D&D Beyond newsletters that get handed out, then maybe I've seen it, but otherwise, if it's like its own specific thing, I haven't seen it, unfortunately. If it gets posted in my Discord underneath the memes channel, then, you know, I will look at it. I look at everything that goes in my Discord. If you put it in there and I enjoy it, then, like, typically I'll just post an emote and let you guys know that I've seen it and I enjoyed it. A lot of the memes you guys put in there are actually quite good, with only a few of them going over my head. There was one like yesterday that was posted in there that went completely over my head, and I was just like, what in the hell does this even mean? There's a Lycan as a subclass in the Bloodhunter as well as the Mutant. It's separate. Yeah, I mentioned that before, that the Mutant is the, like it said, it's the more Witcher-inspired one, but it sort of leans into that whole, like, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, lycanthropy kind of themes there. It's been a long time since I've looked at it, so I don't know exactly how far it goes into it, but yeah, absolutely. Oh, you've actually bought the mini. Congrats, then. Yeah, to be fair, like the $400 price tag, that was basically like around how much we paid for the Bloodborne board game, and you saw how much board game came with that. Admittedly, though, if you were a D&D person, you wanted to do like Lovecraftian Victorian era horror, the minis that came in that Bloodborne board game, absolutely amazing. They are like top tier quality minis that you could absolutely use for D&D as well. Especially because like, I think they're appropriately sized for like how big they need to be hex-wise, or square-wise, to represent their scale for the actual game, which is hysterical. There's a giant robot in 40K, it's a little more than 400. I think I know which one you're talking about. I don't remember which one I've seen, but the one that I remember seeing was either a Space Marines or it was an Imperial Guards one, and it was absolutely massive. Oddly enough, I would have put anime degeneracy past you. How dare you? To be fair, I'm actually, I was super not into anime until I met my girlfriend. And I always told my friends that if I ever got an anime, it was because a girl would get me into it, and lo and behold, she got me into it. She wasn't super heavy into anime as well, but because of the fact that she could get into anime with me, she did, and we watched a lot of good ones and like degenerate ones, mainly because the fact is, why wouldn't you watch the degenerate ones? They're super like chill popcorn stuff to watch at the end of a workday. But it's been a really long time since I've actually sat down and watched an anime. I think the last serious series I watched through was Castlevania Season 3. And I'm super looking forward to the next season coming out. Mainly because the fact is I'm, like I said, a huge Castlevania fan. That anime is great. Maybe minus, like, some parts of Season 2. Because of the fact it got really slow on some of the character story side. But that said, like, I just love how I know the lore that it's based off of and how they're reimagining it. I absolutely think they're doing a fantastic job with it. And the action scenes are friggin' like top tier. They're great. Weekly Roll is the one guy with the Buckethead Paladin. Oh yeah, now I remember the comic that you're talking about. Yeah, no, I've totally seen some of their stuff. They're great. I think it reminds me of like that one comic where it's the paladin, or the, yeah, it's probably the paladin who's going like, so let me get this straight. And he like points out the fact that they like just destroyed an entire village for no reason. I'm like, yeah, I think that's the one you're talking about. And I enjoyed that one a lot. Question, are you guys watching the Anime 5e Kickstarter? That's too vague for me to know what you mean. But if you're talking about like the Critical Role, Kickstarter or anything that's been going on that way, no, but I don't think that one's out yet technically. Funny enough, where my old office used to be before I had to move before I changed and, you know, lost my job and then started the channel, that old office that I was at, like down the street is the studio that's making the Critical Role animated series, which is weirdly close. And a lot of my friends at work were like, they're working on that down there. Oh, I would super love to work on that. I'm just sort of there going like ellipsis going like, yeah, that would be kind of nice, but then again, they're 2D animators, we're 3D, and I'd super hella not want to work in 2D animation. Question, so I've been playing a Barbarian for the first time, 5th level with amazing stats, and I don't know which feat to get first between Great Weapon Master and Savage Attacker. Okay, so if you're saying Savage Attacker, no, I'm thinking about the one that's the half-orc exclusive. But if you want my advice, if you have great stats already, Great Weapon Master, because the flat 10 makes a huge difference. For those of you that don't know, Great Weapon Master, as long as you're using a two-handed weapon, you can take a -5 to your attack roll, and if you still land the hit, you get a +10 to your damage roll. Because you have Reckless Attack, and you can get advantage on any hit that you want, every time you attack, you can take that -5 to your advantage, and that evens out. Because the way that advantage works is that advantage disadvantage basically is a +5 or -5 to your roll on average to a single die. So basically it just evens out. So you're basically just having a neutral attack roll. So you might as well just reckless attack and go for Great Weapon Master. And trust me, like, as long as you have a decent chance of hitting, which you technically will if you have decent stats as well, and advantage, you will hit, and you will do the flat 10. It will make a big difference. Like, that's not a roll. Remember, that's not a variable. That is an absolute minimum 10 addition to your damage roll. That's why it does so much. Savage Attacker you can take later, and that will just help increase the rolls that you get on top of it. But that flat 10 makes a huge difference, especially at lower levels. Gosh, why am I hiccuping so much? Maybe I'm not used to talking anymore. Quarantine's finally getting to me. Who knew? I've had a bunch of friends trying to get me into anime and I refuse. I will remain strong and resolute. D4 for the best of us. Fine. Admittedly, like I've said, that there's a few of them that I've seen which are amazingly good stories. And I think I've mentioned that one of the most impressive cinematography animated things I've ever seen was Your Name. And I saw that in theaters when it came by my place. And that is a genuinely, like, in terms of like a film quality animated animated movie, is genuinely amazing. I actually super was impressed with how it was like directed and shot and animated. Super good storytelling in that. Probably will be completely botched when it gets made into live action. Especially for that North American version that they're trying to make. Oh my god, it's probably gonna be trash. I need to watch Castlevania. I've been watching Fate as of recently. Yeah, I tried getting into Fate. I couldn't get into it. I know a lot of people really like Fate, but the problem with me was the fact that like it was very much like you really had to invest into it to get into it, and I have trouble even investing into video games, and I play a lot more video games than I do watch movies or watch TV series. Oh, that's right, they are making an anime version of D&D 5e. I have not been paying attention to it, but you're right. I remember that being posted around on news feeds. But yeah, no, I'm not paying attention to it. I've been seeing like the castings that have been made up for it and such like that, and I was kind of going like, oh sure, well, like why the hell not? Like some of these actors I know who they are, most of them I don't. But I feel like maybe it's almost like a bit too late, especially since Critical Role's doing its thing now. People are gonna pay attention to that and not give a complete crap about the 5e one. Other than that, they're gonna hold it up entirely against it, and they're just gonna say like, oh no, why would I ever care about this generic ass 5e setting thing? And when I like Critical Role has characters that I actually know and care about. But that said, I mean, like, unless they're going off of like the novels from 5e and they're trying to adapt that to an anime, in which case then yeah, sure, they'll have characters go off of it. But like, could you imagine, like, it's like watching a live stream D&D game with people or characters that you do not give a single toss about, and like trying to get invested is like insanely hard. The reason why like people get so into Critical Role is because like people said it's an anomaly. They have like professional actors that are acting out a character and playing a game at the same time. And to say that like the entire thing is probably improv, I would say would be bollocks. They have to have organized and scripted out and like have writers working on certain things in the background to make sure certain moments and certain things happen in their games, because why wouldn't they? It would make for the best show possible then. And it would also allow them to fully utilize everything that they have if they're supposed to be able to do that. And it probably is one of the reasons why the show is successful. I could be wrong, but I'm just saying that they probably are doing that to assure the best quality show that they can. And anybody else who doesn't do that will have no chance in hell. To be fair, anything made by that guy is a masterpiece. To be fair, I did see his other movie, which was, what was it? Weathering with You, I believe was that it? I did not like it as much as Your Name. Also, I will admit, I didn't really like the ending. It felt like it just sort of just dropped the story and just, they were like, hey, we got the girl back, let's just move on with our lives. And I was like, but like the world's screwed up because of all this, and was it really worth it? Like maybe, yeah, sure, but like it felt like everything just sort of just stopped and then nothing was resolved other than just getting the girl back. And I feel like Your Name was a far better story, especially because where it hung off was like the perfect spot for it to end, which is like when they all grew up and the characters finally met each other, and you felt that one really heartwarming moment with them, and you just knew that everything was going to be okay. That was just such a better ending than that movie. Anyway, I'm going like half between D&D and like half between D&D and anime right now. I don't know why this is happening, but okay, it's probably because of the delay in chat. Question, I've been playing a Centaur Battlemaster fighter. What would you say would be a good use of Know Thy Enemy? You're gonna have to give me a quick second here while I pull that up, because Know Thy Enemy is a racial stat for the Centaur, isn't it? Or is that not, is that a, what is Know Thy Enemy? Is that a Battlemaster maneuver? If I can't find it in the next few seconds, then I'm gonna have to give up on it for right now, I'm sorry. Ah, here it is, Know Thy Enemy. Okay, Know That Enemy is that ability where you get to make a check on an enemy and it tells you if you are either inferior or superior to it in one of two different ways. And it's either its stat scores, its armor class, its hit points, its levels in fighter class if it has any, or its total class levels if it has any. I would say, knowing if you're superior to it in armor class is pretty good, because then if you have a really high armor class and it's still superior to it, then you know that the enemy is extremely tanky. And that means that you will go into it fighting it knowing that you need to be on the defensive, or if you want to make sure that you are landing your hits like as much as possible. Especially if you're going to be like, if you have a barbarian that's like great weapon mastering, or a sharpshooter who's taking that -5 to hit. Basically, like, for those of you that don't know, sharpshooter and great weapon master, the AC number that where that starts to fall off is 18, I think. Once everything gets above 18, the -5 really starts to hurt you, because you will start missing way more often than the damage will actually average out to. So if you have like, you're a Centaur fighter and you have an AC of 18 and you encounter an enemy that is higher than that, that really sets up the stakes of like how seriously you have to take that as a physical detriment. And then you have your mages who use saving throws and use that on them as well. Otherwise, if you have the stat scores being like strength, dexterity, and constitution, dexterity is the other one I would say, because dexterity is like, usually you would say for like its initiative bonus, that's besides the point because it's mostly up to the roll. But dexterity saving throws are really good on your mages. So if you want your mages to be able to hit somebody with a dexterity saving throw spell that could be really detrimental to it, or any of the other ones, it's a shame it doesn't have the mental scores on there, then you could at least gauge it to go like, hey, I have like a 16 dexterity score and this thing is inferior to me. That means he's extremely vulnerable to their spells or something like that. Otherwise, if you have Battlemaster maneuvers that use the other saving throws and you want to make sure that they're going to work, test those ones instead, because I know that you have like strength saving throws or something of the like when you do your maneuvers. That's what I would say for that ability. No, it's a Kickstarter book. Oh, I see. Sorry, I will admit I don't pay attention to literally everything as it goes around. So like I'm welcome to just be wrong about this sort of stuff. Similar to the old Lord of the Rings D&D book from a little while ago. Man, I remember the Warhammer Lord of the Rings stuff. That was like the first way I got into it. I was like, whoa, what the heck is this? And then I found out that like the Warhammer stuff expanded from beyond just Lord of the Rings to going to the like the 40K and the fantasy. Weirdly enough, I never touched Warhammer Fantasy. I went to 40K. I think it was because I was just really into the Tyranids. And I got and made a whole big army of Tyranids. I only got to play with them a few times, which meant that, like, man, that was a waste of money. But otherwise, I mean, like, I got a good amount when I sold the army. I think I got, like, $500 for the whole army, which was pretty nice, considering things. And the I also had a small, like, few bits of Necrons, because I was trying to get into them as well. If I had known any better, I would have just gone Chaos Space Marines, because everybody I knew who played those just destroyed everything, because their units are like, hey, I get, like, 4 units, and they're super, super strong, basically. And, you could probably save a lot of money by having an army that's not like 3 million units. They played D&D before Critical Role was a thing. I could see it working then. The one thing is the fact that like everybody mentions is the fact that like because Critical Role is doing certain things and they're such an influential thing on the entire community that it's really hard to compete with them in any reasonable way. I would suggest a Chainsaw Man, but that's still a... Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought you were saying, like, I'd recommend playing as a chainsaw person in D&D, and I was like, what the hell are you typing? As soon as you mentioned an interest in anime, the chat were like, guys, I haven't watched anime in, like, over a year. Come on. I'm not even, like, into it that much. I mean, like, to say, like, how much I'm, like, not super into it, when I used to do Twitch streams, like, years and years ago, I had a special follower goal that I was able to hit twice. and my goal punishment was for me to play Neko Par, and I had like the largest viewer turnout I've ever played to play those games, and I'm like, damn, why does everybody hate me? Speaking of cat girls, smile. Anyway, again, for anybody that wants to ask me any questions you have about D&D, specifically D&D, want to get off the topic of anime, just do Q, colon to chat, give me your question there. I'll be happy to answer anything you have that way. I will admit, I remember centaurs got brought up in my last Q&A, and I'm glad that they were able to fix centaurs into making them so that way you couldn't just do the infinite centaur stack, but it is weird because centaurs are notoriously large creature races, and you're a medium-sized centaur. So the way I compare like a centaur to like, it's weird because like horses are considered large creatures. And the thing is, horses are like, they're big animals, but they're not like so obtusely big that I would consider a horse to be like as big as like an ogre. I feel like an ogre is much bigger than that. But then again, I might be misremembering an ogre might be a huge creature. I don't believe it is though. I think it's a large though. Watch it, You cannot make me. But I mean, to be fair, if my fiance gets into watching anything anime-wise, she usually grabs me and I end up getting forced to watch it. I mean, I watched Beastars, if I remember correctly, for a little while there. Didn't finish it. That was I'd say it was a weird experience, but it was a good anime. I'd say it was also a weird experience because it was 3D, and like 3D anime, it kind of like is really hit or miss if it looks good or not. Like if you want to have like a good example of a bad 3D anime, go watch the Berserk anime. Oh my god, that is atrociously ugly. And while we're on the topic of that, I've been looking a lot into like, I will admit, fighting games recently. Like I've been looking and paying attention to the new King of Fighters as well as the new, what am I paying attention to? Guilty Gear Strive. Those games are gorgeous. Like also Dragon Ball FighterZ is like one of my favorite games of all time, even though I don't play it. I love watching it. The animation of that is absurdly good. Why can't we make series that look like that? Also, here's my other thing. When I'm doing animation at work, why can't we have like assets and models that run like game models where they run like super, super well? Why do we have to have these super densely, overly done up? Like I will admit, I have like a hate on for modelers sometimes if they just give me like, hey, here, I made a really nice looking model for you. And it's like, okay, cool. Can you optimize it so it doesn't run like dog crap? If you work in animation or 3D in that way, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll be like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And if you don't, you'll be like, what? Question, why are you avoiding this? Embrace the, shut up. I want to drive away everybody who talks about anime, which is like the one thing I will admit when I look at my view count number and I go like, hey, have I been talking about anime too long? And I look at my view count number and it's not like gone down to like 4 viewers. And I go like, apparently not. I will admit, because I'll back up a little bit onto topic of conversation that we talked about before with the whole gothic enemies that are coming out in the Ravenloft stuff, which by the way, I actually probably will buy that book today because I've been forgetting to do it for a while. And I have some gift money left over from my birthday. The UA that we've been seeing for the Feywild, I was super all on board for. I have to wonder if we're going to get a Feywild book that also has Unseelie stuff in it as well, which means we might see another UA that has more of the darker Fey aspects that come with that as well. Now, that said, I have no knowledge of what the Unseelie are really like in terms of like the variety of creatures that we could see, because we got like Hobgoblin, Owl Folk, Rabbit Folk, and Fairy, which by the way, Fairy, obtusely necessary. So many people want to play as fairies, and that does like a great job in the UA doing that race right. The Owlfolk, I think, is just a natural extension of the Aarakocra to be able to cover a different mechanical use of like that, because a lot of people were doing owl bird people already. And the Hobgoblin, I think, is completely unnecessary. It's also very strong compared to the other Hobgoblins. Like, why? It's not like the Hobgoblin's a bad race in general, so I don't understand why they had to make it like ridiculously strong. Mainly because if you make a Mastermind specific one, it's like really exploitable because of its help action being free then. And then there was the the other one that I was talking about as well, which I completely lost on my mind. There's Owlfolk, Fairy, Hobgoblin, and Rabbit Folk. Rabbit Folk, the only thing I think they need to change is that jump where it's like you get to move like anywhere between 1 to 12 additional feet. Can you like make it a rounded number of 5? Oh my god, please don't do this to us. Like, what the hell? We use grids quite often. Like, it works with minis totally fine, but it does not work on a grid, especially on PCs. Beyond that, I want to see like if they do more Unseelie stuff, because we're probably gonna get a Feywild book setting. But the other thing is everybody's going on is the whole like idea of a Dragonlance one, especially with the latest Draconic options that came out in conjunction with the Draconic sub-races that we got. Sub-races, subclasses. I will admit, I've not talked about it, and I don't talk about UA on my channel. And the reason I don't talk about UA on my channel is because of the fact that it comes out completely randomly, usually in the middle of the week. And because I'm working now, there's no way I can make a video covering UA in the middle of the week when I have like no preparation, especially for the video formats that I do, and I can't just drop everything and just suddenly make a video. Like, what? There's no point. By the time I get around to it, it's going to be like kind of old news. And I know that a lot of you would care about it, but the thing is, if you care about it, I'll talk about it in my Discord. So if you want to see what I have to say about UAs, come into my Discord and I will tell you about it. In the terms of the UA for the Draconic options that came out, the new Dragonborns are amazing. Oh, read the rest of your comments? Sorry, I did look over chat there. What would you like to see in D&D? I'll get that in a second, because I do have things I want to see in D&D. The new Draconic options are like the Chromatic, the Metallic, and the Gemstone, I think are fantastic. I do think that they're a little bit wonky, because I think the chromatic ones are great the way that they are. The Metallic, I'm not sure how the secondary breath weapon is supposed to really work. I get it now that that's a signature ability of the Metallic Dragons, because I didn't know that at first. But the ability to have a Fusroda versus an Incapacitation Breath feels weirdly restrictive for what it is. And also, the Fusroda, I get why it's there. It's a Fusroda. But it's way worse than the Incapacitation Breath, which you do, and then you can make them automatically fail on their saving throws for other things following suit. But still, I like it. I just think it's weird, and I think they could do that a little bit better. And the Gemstone one, I think, is great, but I do think it makes it very strong with its ability to summon Flight. But I think it's balanced by the fact that its other feature that it gets is kind of like just roleplay telepathy. The feats that they got with them, I think, are all great. I love the ability to just flavor your weapon to be like another thing. It's basically like giving like a Blood Hunter right as a feat. The Metallic one is a great protection ability. I don't get the Cure Wounds thing. I agree with a few other people that have mentioned as well. The fact that you just get Cure Wounds feels weird. For me, I feel like it should be the Shield spell because it's about protection, not healing. So I think it should be the Shield spell, not Cure Wounds, because the Shield spell is just as useful. And also with the Gemstone feat, I think that one I'm not remembering off the top of my head. I think it's like a Rebuke. I think that's just fun. It's very short range, but I think it's fun. And then with all the new spells that came out, I think that some of them are like weirdly useful. Some of them people said are like a little bit underpowered for their level. I don't think that's true. I think it's the fact that we have certain spells that are very, very overpowered for their level. Kind of like, you know, Fireball being overpowered for 3rd level. Because I mean, like, look at like the Dragon Psychic Lance that's in there. That one is absurdly powerful for a 4th level spell. But I feel like we need certain spells that are like stronger and weaker within the zone spell ranks to give sort of diversity to the classes that may or may not be able to select certain spells. I mean, like, Weird is a 9th level spell. It certainly as hell does not need to be a 9th level spell, but then again, it might be the fact that some of these spells are specific for the DM to put on NPCs and not for the players to take for themselves to be as efficient as possible. That might be just my viewpoint on that as well. But yeah, I'm super looking forward to the Draconic book. That's very obviously going to be a Dragonlance book at this point, because I think that all the stuff that's going in there is basically on tier with the Gothic options. I think those are great. Anyway, if there's anything that to get back to the question that I was asked, that I specifically want to see in D&D, I would say, I've mentioned it before, I want to see a plant race, and I want to see an insectoid race. When it comes to classes, I think it's really, really hard to think of a class that isn't already covered by the other stuff. I think Artificer was great. Like a Tinkerer Mage, or a Tinkerer Half Mage basically, was such a perfect thing that worked really well as its own class instead of being a subclass to something like Paladin or Ranger. Because it would have been really, really weird on those ones. Because the main thing that I look at when you want to make a new class is you look at the core abilities of the classes, and then you go, are they something that's like a really generalized thing that could slot into various different themings, or is it very specific to its one particular use? And the core classes of the Artificer are very much its own particular thing, because it really revolves around the use of magic items and creating magic items. And that is like very much a thing that is not touched on by anything else. Not even a wizard subclass touches on that sort of thing. But yeah, I mentioned before, like, I want to see a shrub person get added to D&D. I know that some people have added that kind of stuff, but I want to see that kind of thing. And an insectoid race, I've seen like the insectoid races from like the Grimrock games. If you guys haven't played Grimrock 2, it's a actually fantastic game. I own Grimrock 1, I haven't played it, but Grimrock 2 is fantastic. As like a classic, like old style RPG from like, you know, the 90s. And there's like they make for great mages, the insectoid races in there, and I think that's great. And I think that'd be super fun to explore. Like a race like that, either a warrior tribe, and I know that they have some that work like that, or as like a mage with like battle shelled armor, frontlining mages. That'd be super fun. Question: what's your favorite fiend and why? Okay, so for those of you that don't know, demons and fiends are different. Fiends are your lawful evil demons that do contracts for souls for people, and demons are your chaotic evil monsters that are your endless respawns of like Doomslayer kind of grunts, for the most part. If you're talking specifically about a fiend, which is the lawful evil one, there are a few that I've used, and I like to use fiends more often than demons, but I will admit, because they are this weird flavor of fiend, succubus and incubus are something that I like to use, mainly because the fact is players always like to roleplay against them, which is great. But beyond that, I have used a Cambion, which I believe is a fiend, because it's like the spawn of a fiend and a human, and I like playing as those, even though they're kind of like bastard children, basically. And, there's another fiend I've used as well, but I'm not remembering off the top of my head, because the thing is, like, a lot of times when I do a lot of fiends in my campaigns, they are homebrew fiends, so I'm not able to name it off the top of my head without looking through, like, a solid list of it. But off the top of my head that I will say that I've used often that I know that's in there are, like, succubus and incubus, because, like, they're so easy to use, and people like playing off of them, and it should go to show that even my own DM that I play with when I was in Davaran liked them as well, because he used them against me, and I ended up getting, you know, the 2 succubi familiars. What did you mean by Blood Hunter right as a feat for Dragonborn? Oh, okay. So for those of you that don't know, and I'll pull it up just so that way I can read it really quickly. Where is it? The Chromatic Dragon Blessing that you can get. Where is it? Gift of the Chromatic Dragon. Here it is. You've manifested your powers, a Chromatic Dragon, granting you the following benefits. It allows you as a bonus action to apply to a martial weapon an elemental infusion. For 1 minute, you get to deal 1d4 of either acid, cold, fire, lightning, or poison damage to it every time you hit with the weapon, and you get to use it once per long rest. So basically, it's like the Blood Rite, because a lot of the Blood Rites I remember from Blood Hunter are you can apply magical damage on top of your martial weapon, and then you get a multi-use reaction that you can use to put resistance to a elemental damage type. So basically what I mean is, like, that part where you add the damage on top of it is like a Blood Rite from the Blood Hunter, because Blood Hunters, I know they get to basically, like, put your hand on your blade, run it down your palm, and then you can just infuse it with a magical damaging property. That basically got brought in by this Chromatic Dragon feat, and that gets officially added, then you have the ability to have, like, an official version of the Blood Rite as a feat. To rephrase it, I mean just monster or entity or whatever in D&D. I think, like, when it comes to fiends, it's just classic contract devils that I've used a lot of. The main thing is the fact that, like, devils in specific are supposed to not be the ones that are outgoing and they just murder people, because the thing is they can't just kill people to take their souls usually. What they needed to do is they need to coerce the mortal into giving up their soul willingly to them, which is why, like, contracts and tricks and deception is used quite often, and that makes for a very interesting and engaging play in D&D, whereas demons, you just sort of throw them up in front of them and it's like, demon, and they just kill it kind of thing. So it's a bit hard to actually get that to work that way, at least in the same engaging level. So I use devils in that way a lot more for the roleplay aspects that they offer, and they do have a lot more strong roleplays. If you want, like, one thing off the top of my head, you can get an imp as a fiend, and an imp is as a familiar. I mean, it is a fiend, so you can play off that relationship with, like, a warlock who takes an imp as their familiar, because they have the ability to do that. Also, pertaining to what I said before about wanting a plant, or what I said before about wanting a plant race, I'm surprised that Ents aren't already a thing. Yeah, we actually had a person who was playing as a homebrew Ent race in the campaign that I had Davaran in. One of the rogues we had was an Ent, yes, believe it or not. There was actually a really funny moment where they were trying to sneak up on we were trying to sneak up on a fortress somewhere that was being guarded, and the way that we did that was that we hid behind the Ent, and the Ent would just very slowly move forward, and the guards noticed, like, is that tree getting closer to us? And they go like, you're just seeing things kind of thing. So we just hid behind the tree and just kept walking forward. It allowed us to sneak in really easily. And you say that, like, why didn't I just cast invisibility? I didn't have invisibility on Davaran. That's how trash he was. Demons and devils are the 2 different types of fiends, but both are fiends, not demons. Okay, yeah, they are classified as fiends in general, but yeah, devils and demons, I keep them separately. There is one devil or demon I used in a one-shot as an antagonist, and it was the, I don't remember the name because it's got a weird name, but it's the demon that is sort of like a jellyfish spirit creature, and what it does is it inhabits the corpses of other things and reanimates them, basically restoring them back to, like, their fully utilized forms. And I used that as a thing that was haunting a manor at one point. and it had been released from an Alkalith, which is like the moss-ridden demon thing that creates portals to hell, and basically it had been nested in the bottom of this manor in like a forgotten cellar way, and it had allowed this creature through, and this creature was like terrorizing the people in the manor, and it got to the point where like it literally went to the head lady of the manor, killed her, and took control of her corpse, and it actually forced the players to fight her, and she was like a powerful mage, and when they killed her, they had to then, because they weren't a high enough level, they got a scroll for a Revivify, and they had to roll to actually make it work, because if you don't know, when you cast a spell that you are actually not able to cast normally, either because you're too low a level or because you're not the right class, you have to make a skill check and actually roll high enough. If I remember correctly, they had a divination wizard in the party, and they had a portent roll that was high enough to be able to succeed on that check, so they used that roll specifically at that time to be able to succeed on reviving the head lady of the house, and it was a really, really good use of that roll, actually, because I was prepared if they failed it, that they were just like, well, you solved the matter, but the head woman there is dead, and like it's really kind of sad because like the whole house is going to basically fall apart because there's nobody there that's part of the lineage there, but they were able to save her instead and keep everything going in a happy ending. Question, what are the most creative use of a spell that you have ever seen? I'm going full Ask Reddit here. I will admit, when I used... for something I personally have done, I've mentioned it before that and I will probably tell a proper story about this later on my channel, I used Illusory Script to make a fake contract that I used to sign the mayor into giving me a bunch of money. And the reason I did all that was so that way if he came after me for it, basically I was gonna be like, oh yeah, like saying like, oh, you never really signed it here or something like that. I remember I used it specifically in that instance, and I have to go back and actually look through the notes that I took for that session to actually get it properly figured out. But I specifically use it to make a fake contract to con him out of a bunch of money. And then basically the evidence was destroyed afterwards, because then once the spell expires, everything you've written with it disappears or can appear as something else. So I could actually like get him to say like, hey, this is something really easy I can make you sign for, and then the user script actually disappears and turns into something else, and I've actually made him sign for something completely different and screwed him out of a bunch of money that way. I don't remember how I did it, but there was definitely one way I've used it that way. The other way that I remember off the top of my head was and I've told this story before on my channel, was my players got stuck at the bottom of a shaft, and I say they got stuck because they went down there using a rope. And they killed a monster and they were coming back. But they were like, why was this monster down here? It's okay, it's fine, we killed the monster, everything's solved, let's go back up. But then when they came back, the rope that they had left going up the cliff, and it was like a 40-foot tall cliff that they had to go up in this cave, was burned to ashes, and they realized, oh, the mage that we met earlier must have done this, because there's nothing else that we know that could have known that we were here and gotten rid of our rope using fire. So the party was like, how do we get out of this pit? Now, they actually had a homebrew pixie that was in this party. So she had a flying speed. She could get up there just fine, but the rest of the party had to be able to climb back up there. And one of them was a Bloxodon, who was an elephant person. So, like, to say the least, climbing a sheer cliff face was not something that they were going to be easily able to do. But one of them had a spare chainmail shirt that they had been able to have as part of their starting equipment that they didn't need to wear, because they were a Forge Cleric, I believe. And what the Forge Cleric did was that he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remake the chainmail shirt using his ability. It's not really a spell, but it's akin to this. This is why I'm mentioning it. Into a length of chain, and I'm going to fasten it to one of my crossbow bolts. And he said, is there a way I can use it to fire it up to the top there? And I said, you can, but there's no way you can make it like latch on to anything. You don't have a grappling hook to make it actually like grapple to anything while it's up there. And he said, well, what if we send the monk, who is also the pixie, up to the top, and he shot at her and used her deflect missile to reduce the damage down to 0, which means that she caught the bolt on the chain at the top there, and then she was able to plant it up there into the ground safely and allow the rest of the party to climb back up. And I was like, that is an incredibly creative use of multiple core class features and subclass features that were really impressed me, actually, because it was like a totally feasible 100% way for them to be able to make a makeshift way of basically jerry-rigging a chain and a grappling hook to work to get up that cliff. I think it was absolutely fantastic. Otherwise, if I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, was there anything else crazy off the top of my head? I know that one of my players used Simulacrum at one point, but they didn't use it for anything crazy. They just used it to make basically a clone of themselves, like a lot of people do. And I don't think I did anything super crazy with Davrian. Oh, I know, there was one. And this is a story I plan on telling very soon on the channel, actually, because I have it in my script folder. Is one time where I used... which one was it? I think I used Alter Self and I transformed into a woman, and I played off that I was a succubus, because you can't become a fiendish-looking succubus because you don't have the right number of limbs for it, because you have the wings. But I used it to dupe one of my friends into giving me a lot of money. You can see I conned a lot of people out of money as Davrian early on in the campaign, because I wanted to have the money so that way, like, I could actually afford things decently, because I joined a session late and had, like, nothing. So I really needed, like, at least 20 gold so I could at least, you know, go to the inn and actually pay for a room, basically. I created an illusion of Oberon using silent image and gave him the voice with minor illusion in and or where it was worshipped by cults temporarily believed that one of their gods came before them. Yeah, I've definitely heard of a lot of people doing similar things like that as well. And being able to combine silent image with like minor illusion to be able to create the sound for it as well is a really clever way to be able to combine those spell effects together. As long as you can do that, because I know that like if they're overlapping concentration, you can't. You would need a second mage to be able to do that. But I don't remember those spells in particular. But I know like people have definitely done that. I feel like I never got a chance to really use like an illusion specifically to dupe somebody, but I remember there was an instance in my first campaign where one of our rogues specifically tried to Metal Gear Solid past somebody using an illusion that they created as a barrel, and they tried to basically, the whole party had been kidnapped, they've been taken prisoner by orcs because they were wanted by the villain, and they were doing it for the villain's bounty, and they were trying to escape from the prison, and the arcane trickster rogue created an illusion of a barrel around themselves to try and sneak by because they didn't want to use the higher level spell slot for greater invisibility. I believe they had that. And they tried to sneak by, but they got seen by one of the orcs, and then one of the orcs was like, is that barrel moving? And they were like, what? No. And then the guy stood perfectly still, and he's like, ah, okay, fine. He's like, do you want an ale? And the orc got up to go open the barrel up to get some ale, but the person was like, shoot, I'm gonna get, like, they're gonna touch my illusion and realize that it's fake. So what he did was that, like, in the middle of all of that, he quickly changed from casting an illusion of a barrel around himself to being greater invisibility. So the barrel just disappeared as the orc went up to touch it, and then he was like, oh, it's a ghost barrel! And everyone started getting freaked out. The whole, basically, even though they didn't know the prisoners had escaped, the whole fortress went on high alert because they thought they were haunted by ghosts. And I remember my players killed themselves laughing. They thought it was one of the funniest things that I reacted to so impromptuly. And they were like, oh great, and the whole fortress on high alert, but they're on the lookout for ghosts. This is great. So they were able to get their way out of that. They had to fight their way to the front door because they had all backed up over there and were just watching everything there. But it was just like, I remember there was one point where they were like trying to talk to one of the ghosts, and one of the my arcane tricksters used minor illusion to throw their voice, and they tried to say like they were the ghost bearer. It's like, I'm not merely a ghost bearer, I am the ghost of the fallen queen of the orcs. And they're like, oh, it's the ghost of the fallen queen. I thought she were slain. Ah, back foul demon lady, we shall not serve you ever again. And I'm Sephirothing the poor guys and stabbing them in the back. It was really stupid. That whole session was such a big wipe of meme shittery in order for them to get out of what they were doing. Anyway, there you go. There's a story like half told in that regard. There's not all. There's a bit of a. I think I have it written down so I can make a cohesive story video of that one later. But I don't have it memorized because that was like 4 or 5 years ago. Deflect missiles is super useful sometimes. Yeah, actually, for those of you in my Discord that have been kicking around in there in the homebrew channel, I've been posting some things because I specifically noted the fact that in 5e, there is no cantrips in Abjuration, Illusion, and Divination that deal damage. Now that makes sense, but because of a thought experiment, I wanted to create options that worked. And I've been posting a few of them in there because I made up some cantrips that I think are actually quite good. But I will admit, the Abjuration that deals damage was insanely hard to think of because how do you make a protection spell that deals damage, let alone one that's a cantrip and not have it be overpowered? And I think I came up with a good one there, but one of the options I did consider was creating an Abjuration cantrip that was like Deflect Missile, but it worked only in melee range. I tried it. In theory, really doesn't work because if it scaled too well, it would be too repeatable, it would be too powerful. So I created basically a close range rebuke that dealt damage in response to taking damage as a protection spell, and it also pushed people away from you. And I felt that that was far more useful as an Abjuration spell and way less exploitable because basically it's like doing like reaction melee spell attack, but it does knockback and it does like minimal damage, like a D4 damage. But you can see those things I posted up there and stuff like that that I post around every once in a while in the homebrew channel because sometimes I make my own stuff and I just share it. So you can get that kind of stuff from there. Any good uses for the Awaken spell that you've seen in a game? Let me quickly check what that spell is. If I actually can find it. a player handbook spell, so yeah. This has gotta be yeah, it's a higher level spell, that's probably why. Oh, Awaken is the ability to basically turn and animate things that are non-animated, right? Okay, so the most that I've seen is basically speak with and being like plants or undead, and that's how most people typically use this sort of stuff. But in terms of Awaken, in terms of animating a physical object, the closest we ever came to that was honestly animate objects, which was like literally just an ability that one of our bards used. It was actually my fiance, and she like she animated. She had as a part of her character that he had, she was playing as a tiefling bard, and he had a bunch of wooden carved totems that were his friends. And funny enough, after she animated them, I had a bunch of hellhounds in the encounter, and they all burnt her friends to a crisp. So I was like, she was really sad. But in terms of Awaken, actually bringing something to life, funny enough, no one has ever used this. Especially because the fact is, if you read the material components for the spell, which do get consumed, it's 1,000 gold pieces of a gemstone, which is like, oh my god, okay. So this is probably why it doesn't happen. But then again, unlike all the other Awaken spells, this does last for a month, I believe. And it is friendly towards you. So I mean, like, is there ways to make it work? Then sure. I feel like if you want to make good use out of it, using it to change the structure of a large scale area, like being able to, like, as it mentions here, you're doing like roots and vines and such like that. You could use that to change the conditions of a battlefield by having roots and vines impose and close off areas of a battlefield. You could even use it to create vines and roots that cage in around you to protect you, kind of like a wall of force in a way. That's it. Is it worth it at a 5th level spell, especially compared to Wall of Force? Absolutely not. But can I say that like doing this sort of thing is an option for you to do? Yes, but I've never actually seen it done because of how niche I think it is. Minor illusion isn't concentration, but silent images. Yeah, so then you can combine the two effects of them at the same time then. Sephirothing my lord. Yeah, you know, just randomly showing up out of nowhere and stabbing somebody in the back. This is not spoilers, right? That game's been out for like, what, 30 years? It's probably 20 at this point, but whatever. Question, lineages from the UA, yes or no? If you mean any particular one, yes, because I like a lot of them that are in there. But if you mean the way that they're doing lineages versus races now, with the fact that they made it so that way, like, certain aspects of your character are not dictated by the race that you pick, I think that's fine. If anything, there's a lot of things in Tasha's that were established that I think are just good to have established in a book, because DMs like me, I'm lenient on making changes to things if it makes good sense. But the thing is, I don't want to be lenient on one character changing their character or one player changing the character in a specific way and not offering that to my other players with the expectation of them coming in advance, especially because I bring people in blind usually for my sessions a lot of the time. So them to come and go like, okay, what are the established like expectations of what I get to make as a character? For me to be like lenient with one and not lenient with another would be super unfair. Just having a book that basically says, hey, you know how it says you can change your subclass or you can be your race and just change these specific things, like reorganize the stats in these to make it so that way it's like specifically the way you want to be statted? Like, having a book that specifically says it's okay, just let people do this is great, because then that means players come in with the expectation that they can just do that, and I'm okay with it. Because I already was okay with it, but there was no official rule stating as such, so I didn't have to like remind them or not remind them or impose a rule on this and that way or not. Basically, it's just like, hey, it's established that you don't need to be crazy about rules lawyering about this or like being strict about this. Just let people do it if it works for them. And now that they know this, they can come in, know that, and it's just convenient. So I feel like, yes. I will admit, though, the one thing I do miss, though, is the fact that I do kind of like the imposed stats, because it helped like differentiate like the physical attributes of the different races. And also, it makes a lot of the sub-races of like Tiefling completely pointless, because a lot of them are just different arrangements of those stats with like very minor changes beyond that. And now it's like, oh wow, we really could have like not needed to post like 7 different races of Tieflings if we just had like Tasha's rules like 4 years ago. Question, what are your general thoughts about Goliaths? Underrated, I'd say, mainly because of the fact that Goliaths, they're not like a super strong race, but they're resilient in some ways, I believe. But the other thing is the fact that they're powerful build, similar to how orcs have it, if I remember correctly, where you get to carry like twice as much weight as normal. If you're playing a game where you have weight implications on your character, you actually can't carry that much. And if you allow people to just carry whatever the hell they want around with them all the time, especially if they, have a bag of holding, then sure, the bag of holding does a lot of that for you because it carries like 300, 500 pounds. But if you have it on your person, my God, especially if you're a low strength sorcerer or wizard, you have to realize that like carrying like enough to be able to like carry your stuff for like sleeping, eating, and drinking, along with your equipment, that takes up a lot of weight on your character. And if you want to be able to find loot and then bring it back with you, you actually can't bring a whole lot with you. Even coins weigh an astronomically huge amount. If you get like, oh, I want to carry like these 10,000 coins I got at the Dragon's Den, it's like, you can't. It weighs like 100 pounds or something like that. Actually, if I remember correctly, it'd be 1,000 pounds, which like, there's no way. When it comes to having a powerful build character, that really allows you to not just play into a character that can actually get the loot and the equipment and actually use it properly. The other thing is that if you are encumbered, you slow down. And the one thing that people don't pay attention to when they don't do weight implications is that armor, heavy armor, weighs an astronomically huge amount on your character. Like most characters can carry only about 125 pounds. And armor that weighs like 70 pounds is most of your character's weight limit there, and you are encumbered, which slows your movement speed. So I'd say that even though like people go like, oh, like they've seen Grog, so they think that like a barbarian leans really hard into Goliath. Goliaths are actually great as clerics and paladins and fighters because they can wear the heavy armor and not be impeded by it. Same with orcs, if they have that same ability as well, because they can wear the armor and they can move around quickly while wearing it. Even though the people typically put these on towards the barbarians. The only thing I would say is that if you go with the barbarian, you don't have to wear any armor while you're in those characters, then you have a lot of carry capacity to be able to haul around all of your loot with you. So take your choice there with how you play with it. But yeah, I think they're a bit underrated, specifically because the fact is if you're playing a game with encumbrance, they're extremely valuable. Otherwise, maybe a bit less so. It's a good martial race though. Yeah, I've only seen Goliaths ever twice. And one of them was you, Shinra. When it comes to other races that I've actually like rarely ever seen, like I've had Aarakocra, I've had Aasimar like a whole lot. Bugbears I've never seen. Centaurs I've never seen. Changelings I have seen. Dragonborns I've seen. Dwarves I've seen. Elves I've seen. Furbolg I've not seen. And I think Furbolg, they have powerful build as well. There you go. There's your more magically inclined version of the heavy carrier as well. Which is funny because I think they're more akin to druids, but it's like druids aren't really known for wearing heavy armor, especially because their armor is supposed to be made out of wood, which I'm always like, thanks for telling us that, and then not telling us how that actually is supposed to work, Wizards of the Coast. Genasi's I've seen. Gith, that's the one I've never ever seen, and I don't hear anyone talk about. Githyanki. No one ever plays these things. And I think it's because they're like ugly alien elves. They're super weird. 100 sodas and 5 kilograms of candies. Pog. Actually, I just got done with like a bowl of candy that I had from earlier this week, and I was just like, oh yeah, get the sugar high to get through the work week, which is kind of nice because I actually had a pretty easy work week this time. We'll look on through here. I've had gnomes. I think I've had a goblin once. No, I'm getting confused with a Kenku. You'd think so. The small, tiny weirdo races is what I'm getting confused with. I played as half-elf, and I've definitely seen them. Had one person plays a Droudison half-elf. Very good race, by the way. Underrated, like I said. Halflings. Weirdly enough, I don't think I've had somebody play as a halfling yet, which is weird. You think you would because they're not bad, especially because they get lucky. Hobgoblin I've never seen. Human I see all the time, especially because of my one player who mains humans all the time. Kalashtar. That's like a weird flavor of human. I don't really count that, but I've never seen them. Kenku I've seen. Kobold I've seen. Lionin I've not seen, but they're really new. Lizard folk I've seen. Minotaur I have not seen. I've almost played as a Minotaur once. I made a character for one of my friends, but I never played in their session. I made the character more as something for them to test something for their session, because it was for a campaign that I wasn't playing in. Loxodon I've seen. Sadirs I have not seen. Shifters I've seen. Orcs I've seen. Tabaxis I've seen. Tieflings I've seen. Tritons I've seen. Verdin I've not seen, but that's fine because Verdin are just like attractive goblins, basically. Warforges I've seen, and Yuan-Ti I've seen. Admittedly, when it comes to Warforged, I even allowed somebody to play as a Warforged back in the day when it was in its UA format. Remember UA Warforged? Where they had scaling AC on their characters, and they would like gain AC as they leveled up? You get like a character with like 28 AC, and they didn't have to wear any armor. It was mad broken. I'm so glad they got rid of that. Some people are like, oh, they nerfed them too hard. It's like, no, they balanced them. They were stupid overpowered. Are you insane? They were genuinely like the strongest race. Like they made Yuan-Ti look like chumps. That's how strong UA Warforged were. They were absolutely insane. It's 11 p.m. where you are? Yeah, I think you mentioned it before that you were European, Helge. You want to play a Githyanki at some point? Yeah, I know that especially that Githyanki are a little bit more in the public eye, especially because of Baldur's Gate 3, especially because one of the main characters in that is a Githyanki character. Especially because of the fact that the whole thing revolves around this early game, revolves around Mind Flayers. And Githyanki are the race that basically like swore vengeance against the Mind Flayers or something like that. I know they chased them through all time trying to kill them off. Especially because of the fact that they're worth killing off. Mind Flayers are super evil creatures. Florbugs have powerful builds, huh? Yeah, I think that's because of the fact that they're akin to giant folk. But I think they're more like the Feywild version of giant folk. I'm not certain of that. They have like the fuzzy ears with like feathers or hair poking out of them. But they're big. That's why they have powerful build. They also have like the ability to turn invisible, if I remember correctly as well. So they have like some more magical inclinations, especially because of the fact that they went into wisdom more heavily. Some people are like, I think I even recommend it. Florbolg makes for a good race for a druid. But that's mainly because the fact is that they just happen to work well, and not a lot of races work well for druids, raw as they were. And not only did it work for them, it's like thematically worked really well, because Furbolgs are supposed to be played into the more druid aspect of things, as in general. There's some guy who took every kind of powerful build and then asked a forum how he could exploit his 5-ton carry capacity. Carry a boat. Actually, there's a story I'm going to tell on the channel at some point about the time where I had 3 folding boats. Yes, Davrian had 3 folding boats at one point. Did we ever end up using those folding boats? Yes, multiple times. Oh, excuse me, Jesus. Some of you might be wondering, did the folding boat happen to be the boat that we used to go down the river at the very end of our campaign that I talked about before I got engaged to Coco? Yes, it ended up being a folding boat. But there were other uses I had for the folding boat. They were far, far stupider than that. You might think, where could you use a folding boat? You said you were on land for most of that campaign. And I was like, yes, exactly. That's where I got it to use it. Did you drop it on somebody? Nope, but I absolutely used it. Furbolg Druid Life Cleric. That's a good way of doing it. Especially if you're playing as a support Druid, Life Cleric can add a huge amount to it. Especially because the fact is that I didn't know this for the longest time. And somebody mentioned that Life Cleric allows you to add your Wisdom modifier to every instance of healing that you apply. Or it's like you multiply up the spell level plus your Wisdom modifier to every instance of healing when you cast a spell. And people have mentioned, does that work with Goodberry? Absolutely does. And it makes Goodberry an absurdly good healing spell for 1 level. Because you get 10 uses of it for 1 spell slot. Yes, you have to eat the berry to get it, but it's like, man, that allows you to just multiply up the effectiveness of that perk by 10, which is insane. No other healing spell can compete with that, even if it's like 1 instance of it, especially because you can spread it around to multiple people. It's a very good combination that way. Bob Bowers knows how to use the folding boat. Yeah, I know that YouTuber. I've not seen his instance of a folding boat, but I bet you the way I used it, probably far more degenerate than the way he used it. And I say it because the way I used it was basically the most like, I did not need to use it, and the reason I used it is because I got angry. Especially because, spoiler alert, it cost me one of the Succubus Familiars. I could resummon them, don't worry, but I lost one of them because of this. And because of that, I was like, alright, screw this, and pulled out the folding boat. And my DM was like, really? You're gonna use it for this? And I was like, yes, because I don't care anymore. I had Davrian lose his patience like a number of times. One of them, like I said, was the one time when he threatened Rin's life. And I'm still not sorry for that. Rin tried to kill me and Coco. I'm never gonna be sorry for anything that happened to her. Even if my players like that I was with were like, we need to save her. And I'm like, no, I'm plotting to kill her. At least until like I got married to Coco, then I was like, all right, fine. I won't try and kill her. And the only reason I'm doing it is because of love. Once again, for everybody out there in chat, if you are interested in having your question answered, just Q:, and type your question in chat, and I will try and get to it. Preferably D&D related questions as I ramble on here for a little bit longer. I'm planning for the stream to go for at least another 40 minutes. So that's where you got it going for. Cassie, hey, it's my favorite goblin. How's it going? Glad to see you here. Actually, I feel really bad because most of the time whenever I see you in my Discord channel, you just happen to be there when I just happen to not be there, which is like super sad. Just look back over here at my monitor being open to the list of races that I can check over here, and I'm just going like, man, getting PTSD again from the Warforged UA. I don't know why they thought that'd be a good idea. I think it made sense with them being machine races and stuff like that, but it's like, mechanically speaking, it's like, who thought this was a good idea? You outscale people in full plate armor is such a terrible idea. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think about other things I could think about for D&D as well. I mentioned that I've been looking into monster creation, and I was trying to do it on a mathematical standpoint as well. The one thing I really, really hate about 5e and the Dungeon Master Guide is because of the fact that if you look at the table of charts needed to be able to create monsters in 5e, I've actually plugged in monsters from the monster manual into that chart to see if Wizards of the Coast's own system works to identify the CR of their own material, and it doesn't work. All of the monsters in the book, for the most part, almost all of them, like every single one I've checked, is of a CR that is either just below or significantly below where it's supposed to be. Like, oh, you got the CR2 monster, it's actually like a CR like 1 or 1/4 monster, or 1/2 monster, and I'm like, why is it so much lower than it's supposed to be? And it's because of the fact that they're building these monsters to fill specific roles for specific instances, like, you know, a goblin commander. It's supposed to be like this one goblin commander that you use. It's like, yeah, so they operate differently, but why is it a CR2? A goblin commander is actually not a CR2 monster by all mathematical standpoints, which makes using their table of charts in there completely ridiculous. The last one-shot that I ran, I used that chart to be able to create all of my instances to rebalance all the things that I was doing, and I ended up making monsters that had like 2 times the HP that they needed because of the fact that I was like, okay, well, these things are technically on a CR rating level, what they're supposed to be to make this a balanced encounter, but my players took forever to kill everything, and I felt bad for that because I was like, oh, I get it. Like, the reason why you nuke all the defensive standings of all these CR monsters is because it's boring to just lay into a creature unless it's like a 1v party creature. Super stupid. And I'm still trying to figure out the perfect math to be able to get that in there. I think I realized what I did wrong, and I'm gonna look into it, and then I'll hopefully, if I figure it out, like how to be able to balance this stuff a lot better, I might even make a video on it, because nobody goes into this stuff. Everybody's just like, the concept of actually creating a monster, just copy and paste it from something in the book, or just come up with whatever the hell you want, and just try and make it around this like damage level. It's like, no, there's like a math standpoint that makes it like either function well or not, to make it so that way it's like for your game is either degenerating and like not fun to play against, or is like reasonably like fun and a challenge and won't threaten the lives of your players randomly because you randomly made it way too strong. Like PTSD when I threw a Shadow Dragon at my party by mistake and I made it too high a CR. Question, any plans to have another fan games DMing or playing? If you guys are talking about another game that I'm going to be hosting in my D&D server, yes, every 3 to 4 months I plan on running a session in there, and I usually post the sign up for 1 week in my server, and you guys always get added about it, so if you leave notifications on, because the only thing I add about is for things like this in my announcements channel and when I run games, so you'll see them that way. I post those up there, I put up for about a week, and then I select the people from the players test there, and then we go through about another week after that to be able to get our characters organized before we actually play the game. So basically about like, you know, I have the game prepared about 2 weeks in advance of when I actually start putting the signups. But yeah, I'm aiming to have a one-shot conceived of probably around like late May or June is at this point, is when I'm looking to have a game session running at that point. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet. If I made it my Bloodborne game, I'd have to let one of my players, my mods in there, because he really wants to be in one of those. But if I'm not doing that, part of me has thought about doing an entire one-shot that revolves around the party coming into contact with a cursed magic item that they have to get rid of. Part of me wanted to make it the Hand of Vecna, and it like attaches itself to one of the hands of one of my players, and just having them deal with that and the fallout from having that. But I don't know if I'm going to do that yet. If it happens or it does or doesn't, we'll see. It's months away, but I plan on doing one soon. Like I said, every quarter I plan on doing at least one game. I'll say one thing about Goodberry is that you should always cast it before a long rest, because since it's 24 hours you can use the remaining spell slots, you got to get right back. Absolutely true. And if you happen to be an elf, technically, because you have trance, you can get it back in 4 hours, which means that, like, you can get your... I know you can't take multiple long rests in a day, but still, that said, it works exceptionally well on them, because the fact that you can get it back and then you have even less time you need to rest for it in order to get your spell slots back. At least I think that you're technically not allowed to rest the long rest more than once a day, because of the fact that elves can do it in 4. I will admit, I didn't mention the Goodberry thing in my subclass guide for clerics, and the reason I didn't mention that is because of the very obvious fact that clerics don't get Goodberry. Now, you can magic initiate to get it, which a lot of clerics do to be able to have access to it, or you multi-class like one level of druid into it. But, like, by default, I typically don't, like, think that hard about, like, crossing over classes super hard when I do my subclass guides, because when I do my subclass guide, I'm not talking about typically just the way to best play that subclass or the best way to play the class in general. Otherwise, I'd be repeating myself a whole lot. I thought I'd go in and I go, hey, this is your subclass specific feature, and what are the specific things you can do and take for it that work with it by itself. And of course, the fact that, like I said, back then I actually didn't know the Goodberry thing. I probably could have mentioned that one, and I probably should have because it's being that good. But if you really didn't want to do it, then it's not going to hurt you that hard. The Life Cleric is a really good sustain in itself nonetheless, especially at higher levels where it's like, hey, you know how you roll for healing? No, you just get max value every single time. That is nuts. That makes your healing spell so good. Mass healing word, or mass heal in general, like, damn. And that's to say, at least, that I had in my level 1 to 20 campaign. During the final boss fight, our cleric actually held on to their 9th level spell slot for the last final battle, and everybody was like on their last limbs, and they were like really, really running out of spell slots, abilities. They were really running low. The boss was running low. And then out of nowhere, the cleric's like, I cast 9th level spell, I cast heal. And I went, damn it, everything, you just won the combat because everyone got fully healed back up to max and the boss was screwed. And it basically died like 2 or 3 rounds later. Warforged can do it in 4-2, I believe. Damn, that's kind of scary. Question, do you think D&D needs a reliable pocket plane dimension, or would that be too overpowered? I have multiple character ideas where I need to pop in and out of a dimension, but nothing is large enough. That said, you say this, but the Genie Patron Warlock, the new one that came out in Tasha's, you get the ability to go into your lamp, or the item that you use as a lamp, and that is a pocket dimension that you have that's like a really cozy, like flourish, nice sitting room, basically. And that you can use as a pocket dimension for like lots of other things.
It's safe.
Oh, sorry, my fiance literally is chiming in here. She said that you have a player in your campaign right now that has a Genie Patron Warlock?
Last camp, and he got thrown over his shoulder by an orc because he was... and then he went to his ring. If not, he would have been giga dead.
So basically what he did is he got Sekiro ogred off the cliff.
Yeah.
Okay, so if for those of you that didn't hear her, she mentioned that she had a player who just joined her recent campaign because she had some new players come in for the one she's playing in. And he is a Genie Patron Warlock, and he got grabbed by an orc and thrown off of a cliff. And in order to survive the fall, he went into his patron's vessel and actually survived the fall that way. And I'm like, damn, that is insanely smart, actually. But if you guys are looking for other pocket dimension spells that work like that, Rope Trick is another one that comes off the top of my mind, because Rope Trick allows you to create a rope that goes straight up into the air, into a little portal that takes you into a small pocket dimension. And it's basically a void pocket dimension. There's nothing in there. It's like a black void that you can go into. But that's another way to get into a pocket dimension. A lot of people use Rope Trick whenever they're like, hey, we need to set off an explosion and be in the room when it goes off. So what they do is they Rope Trick up into the pocket dimension and set off the bomb and then come back out. So that's another way you can do it. Gotta get going because you're DMing a game right now. Took a break to eat some pizza. See you guys later. Thanks a whole bunch for stopping by, Cassie. It's always great to see you. You need to pop in and out, but it's once per rest. Genie can only pop out of dimensions once per long rest. Yeah, so you can't make regular use out of it. So I'd say like Rope Trick is a way to do it because that's a spell that you cast. The only thing is I think Rope Trick might be 3rd level, which is unfortunate because it's a pretty high up their spell. If it's not, it's like 2nd level. I don't think it's 1st. Let me take a quick look actually. There are other pocket dimension spells that do exist, but they're all like higher level spells. Yeah, Rope Trick's 2nd level, so that's actually not a terrible use of a 2nd level spell, assuming that you're not like saving up for things like Suggestion. And there's a lot of good 2nd level spells actually. But if you don't have access to a whole bunch of them, then you can use that way to be able to do it. I'd say it's pretty reasonable to say that the dimension door that's created by Rope Trick is not something that like somebody can easily enter into unless it climbs the rope. At least that's the way I would reason about it. So that way if you do set off a bomb in the previous room, you don't have to worry about the shockwave and the fire like scorching you in your pocket dimension. Still, it's at least a repeatable way that you can do it. So, as I'm starting to think about some other things I can start rambling about. Second level spells, I mentioned that. There's a lot of good second level spells. And I feel like it's weird that there is, because I don't remember there being it until I like play a spellcaster and I go like, oh, second level, and I'm like, oh, there's actually a lot of spells that are actually really good to actually take at second level. As I just started look over a light list here. Aid, it's your HP buffing spell, very good. Alter Self, basically your shapeshift spell. Technically this Bark Skin, it's an AC boosting spell, but it's a very good AC boosting spell. It's just only exclusive to rangers and druids, for the most part. Blur, very good defensive spell. Darkness, Dark Vision. If you don't have Dark Vision, then there's your way to get it. Darkness, extremely useful spell if you have like Devil's Sight especially. Enlarge, Reduce, Enhance Ability. Flame Blade. I know there's like Flaming Sphere, I think got adjusted recently, so that way you basically, like, it was a really, really good spell for second level, and I think they had to nerf it back a little bit. Old Person. Heat Metal. Man, that is a spell that is underrated. How big is Rope Trick in the Dimension? Actually, I can check that for you. Let's see. Attacks and spells can't actually cross through the entrance. Yeah, that's what I thought. Those can see out by a 3 foot by 5 foot window centered around the rope. How big is the Explanatory Dimension? It can hold up to 8 medium or smaller creatures. So 8 medium or smaller creatures, that's essentially a 15 by 15 foot area. So it's not super big, but that's basically what it is. It's basically a small void place that you can go into. With a party of 4, you're pretty much fine. Ray of Enfeeblement, that is not very useful to have as a second level spell. There's not a lot of good necromancy spells, are there? Genuinely, there's just genuinely not that many good necromancy spells. If it was so good, just cast it on the guy's armor and then just run. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, actually, my fiance who just popped in here, her character right now is a Fire Genasi Artificer, and she's like really, really egging to be able to get to a level high enough, because they're still like pretty low level, to be able to cast Heat Metal. And when she does, she's just gonna go to town with it, because that is an amazing debuff spell, super underrated. I think there was even a posting on D&D Beyond recently that came out, like an ode to Heat Metal, because it's an amazing debuff spell. It does require the opponent to have something metal on them, or otherwise it doesn't work. But like, I remember in my campaign, I had a player who was it was the Arcane Trickster. They cast Heat Metal on an animated suit of armor. It's like, well, it's not like he could take the armor off. He is the armor. So the thing just melted to death. Good old cook and book trick. Yeah, I think I heard some people talk about the fact that if you get a high mobility character like a centaur and you cast Heat Metal on your target, you can then just run away from them and they just die, because there's no limit on the range that you have to stay within to be able to maintain concentration on the spell. It's not like Witch Bolt, which is trash. Seize of Ice is always good. Yeah, I know which YouTuber you're talking about with that one there. The guy with the animated spellbook, right? I remember he talked about infinite damage with Chaos Bolt, which is true. You can do that. And there's an old video series that I did on my channel talking about rolling as many dice as possible. And the way that I made that series work was, in one turn, what is the most amount of one type of dice that you can roll? And I made up videos for rolling as many D4s as possible and D6s. When it came to D8s, I was going to make a special shout out, because I haven't done that video yet, mainly because nobody cares about those videos, about rolling infinite D8s on Chaos Bolt. But the thing is, it's completely RNG, and the chance of doing that is so astronomically low to roll a really, really high amount of doubles with that ability to be able to keep chaining it together. Also, it has to strike multiple targets. So I was like, what's the other way to get as many D8s out as possible? In the other ones that I did, it was all single target damage that you did. So it means that you could deal with like D4s, you could deal like over 100 damage in one turn with D4s, and it's nuts to be able to set that up. With the D6s, you could deal up to 1,000 damage, but it required ridiculous setup to be able to get it to work. For those of you that don't know, assassins and cliffs and a lot of poison, basically. Cliffs, he said. And For D8s, I believe I was able to make it work. You specifically need to be like an assassin, again, because that's the way to double most dice that you roll. But it's actually to use, I believe, lightning arrow, and you have to pack everyone into one tight room to be able to get as much splash damage off of the lightning arrow as possible. And the amount of damage that you could roll off that is insane. I actually did the calculation, but I haven't got the script made up for it because the fact is, around that time actually is when my Tiefling video took off, so I shifted gears on the channel's focus a little bit back then. So you can hold up to that many, like, as in living matter tiers apart, but it's insanely big, or is it a 5 foot and can hold up 8 creatures? It just says it can hold 8 creatures. It does not specify how big it is, so as far as I can consider it like a black voided plane with like one little doorway in it, and you have infinite space that you can use around in there, but the presence of the number of creatures that can be in there can only maximize up to 8. So I would say, in that sense, that, yeah, there you go. It's an infinite demiplane space, but there's only so many people that can be present in there before the demiplane starts to implode on itself because there's too much information in the demiplane. Also, keep in mind that, like, portable holes and bags of holding kind of, like, freak out when they go into demiplanes. They might explode or cause dimensional rifts to form because you're putting a demiplane inside of a demiplane, and that's to prevent that from causing exploits. So just be careful what you have because, like, you know, people didn't realize for the longest time that you can't do that. Looking back over here at second level spells, actually, because I was like half like, got this on my monitor. Misty Step, jeez, I keep forgetting that spell is actually second level. Yeah, everybody loves that one. Also Levitate. I keep forgetting Levitate's a second level spell, because the fact is that like at 9th level, I think Warlocks get the ability to cast Levitate at will. Now here's the thing, and I said that Davrian was based off of my FF14 character. That's how you like it. You can fill it up with a bowl. Actually, technically, there's no limit on the amount of creature. Like, I think it's the space of that many creatures. So arguably, you couldn't just infinitely fill it up with that much stuff because the object takes up the space of a creature. But you know, talk about it with your DM. I would say that like. I would say personally that it can only hold as much information, which is basically objects or creatures, as would fit in with an 8x8 space, but otherwise the space in and of itself would be infinite as long as there's not that many things in there. I still believe using a bag of holding and a portable hole is the only way to kill a Tarrasque. There's one way of doing it. Actually, I believe that the, Taking 20 talked about it, and there's a lot of people that brought this up as well, that the best way to instantly kill anything, literally anything, is to use polymorph on it, turn it into a chicken, so something with like no HP, and then cast power word kill on it. Because if you do that, power word kill means that it kills anything as long as it has less than 100 HP. Well, if you polymorph a creature into a chicken, it has less than 100 HP, which means you kill it. And then it turns back into its normal self. But the way that it works is that it, like, all damage dealt to a creature carries over into their normal form when they transform back. But if it's an instant death effect, it applies to it because the HP does not apply to it while it's polymorphed. It only applies to it after it changes back. So polymorph power word kill is the easiest way to instantly kill anything. It will ruin campaigns if you let it happen. And that's why I say like high level D&D doesn't work. Also, if you have a villain with power word kill and the ability to polymorph, well, your players are just going to hate him because every time he gets polymorphed, everyone's going to be like, oh dear God, quick, hit the person that's the chicken so that way they break out of their polymorph before he gets his turn again. That is a not fun way to go. But yeah, I was mentioning with Davrian, I had it so that way he was based on my Final Fantasy XIV character, and my favorite mount in that game is the flying chair. And the way I use Levitate with him, because I got it at some point, because I got it to a high enough level, he's like level 15. Well, he was mostly sorcerer. Okay, well, I still had Levitate. I still had a way to use it. Was that I would, instead of, you know, most people would be like, they levitate themselves, or they levitate an object. What I did was that I had Davrian, and I gave him a chair after a while, so he would just sit in the chair and he would levitate the chair. And it would carry him everywhere, because Levitate could carry up to 500 pounds. So, like, absolutely I can levitate a chair and sit in it and just fly around on a chair. And did I have to do that? No. Did I absolutely do that because it was, like, the stupidest thing I could possibly imagine doing? Yeah. And because I wanted to have the image of being with the party, and we'd be going on these long hikes together, and my character would just be floating in a chair behind them. Because it was funny. And it'd be like, well, you're just burning your, like, second level spell slots. Like, yeah, but I was mostly sorcerer. I can burn second level spell slots to have Levitate going for a meme. I mainly did it during one encounter we had where we had to try and, it was a test by the elemental sprites when we first met them, and they were like, get past us and across this body of water, and which was like 60 feet wide, and will let you into our village because they were just playing with us. And every time everybody went into there was like all these ridiculous traps that the elementals had put up because they put up a bunch of glyphs of warding that were down that were causing elemental spells to go off and like incapacitate people. And they would fall into the water and nearly drown. What I did is I just cast Levitate on myself, flew like 60 feet straight up in the air, 60 feet straight across, and 60 feet straight down. So basically I was out of range of anything that the sprites could have done to me, and I just came down on the other side of the river. Did that help any of my party members out? Absolutely not, but that's besides the point. It took me like 3 turns to get over there, so by the time I got over there, like most of them had also made it over, minus like 2 of them who had been like hit by cold spells and slowed down. Once again, as I keep reminding everybody here, type in Q colon before any of your questions in chat. If you have any questions about D&D that you'd like to ask me, anything at all, you're more than welcome to ask them. It can also be off topic slightly for D&D. We've certainly been off topic for a bit this stream as well. I am very happy with how the channel's come in 1 year, by the way. I will admit, I was prepared for the channel to have gotten like 500 subs, especially because I had 500 subs back in like November. And I was like, man, my channel's grown extremely slowly over the most of the year that it's been out by now, because it was only basically going in for about like its last 3 months. Or 4 months, technically. And I was like, yeah, maybe in about 8 months I got 500 subs. I was like, that's pretty good, especially because I had one boom when I did the coverage for Bilgewater module. And I was really happy with that. 500 subs in 1 year, I was like, that's really good. And then in like 1 month, I got 5,000. And I was like, that's way better than anything I could have possibly imagined for the channel. And, well, I admit, like, have my view numbers changed a whole lot since then? Yeah, they've changed. They've gone up, but they've not, like, maintained the astronomical stupidity of the video that went off crazy for me. But I'm still extremely happy with the fact that, like, I've got this really small niche community now, and a lot of people that are in it are people that I genuinely really enjoy talking to. And like I said, I really want to be able to get the chance to be able to run games for you guys throughout the year. And hopefully you guys enjoy being in my games. I'm always constantly like really hard on myself as a DM to be able to give the best experience that I could give for people. And for the most part, I believe a lot of people have told me that they've really enjoyed playing in my games so far. And for me, that's like the best thing I can hope for, because it's not like I get to play in a D&D campaign, especially because the fact is that, like, I know a lot of people would say like, hey, no, come play in mine. But the thing is, like, usually they either don't run at a time where I can join because I have such a tight schedule for most things, or it's with people that I really, you know, don't know. And I really rather play a game with people that I do know or at least somewhat familiar with, so that way, like, when I get into the group, it's not like the most awkward thing in the world. Even with the campaign I joined in with Davrian, and I only knew like 4 of the 8 people involved with it. So that was like at least half the group. So that worked out well for me that way. But in terms of playing games with you guys, like, I'm just hoping that, like, as I keep grabbing you guys up, that you guys really enjoy yourselves and that you guys make for some really fun experiences. Because I got a story even out of my last one-shot that I plan on telling. Shinra's been bugging me a whole bunch about it, and the story is just literally called That Time My Players Had a Battering Ram, because that was ridiculous what they did with that during that campaign, or that one-shot. How did you move while under the effect of Levitate? You can manipulate the object that you're controlling with Levitate. So you can levitate yourself, and then because you are within range, because the thing is there's a limited range. I think you can move an object like 20 feet and has to remain within the range of the spell, which is 60 feet. So you get basically a moving speed of 20 feet when you're levitating something. And as long as you're within 60 feet of whatever it is you're levitating, you can keep levitating it. So if you levitate yourself, you get a flying speed basically of 60 feet. You know, don't lose your concentration or you'll fall. But you get to levitate that or whatever object it is. As long as it's within 60 feet, you can just keep going for the full duration of the 10 minutes. And what I was doing with my chair is that I was levitating the chair and carrying myself. That's the same thing as levitating yourself, basically, except I'm just doing it with a meme and doing it with a chair. So as long as you're within range of whatever it is you're levitating the whole time, you can keep moving it, even if you're moving it further than 60 feet. You just have to stay with it. Like I said, that does include yourself, because there's no limitation on it. Actually, it's one creature or loose object. So to say that, like, the chair carry me was technically, like, pushing it, then, like, yeah, sure. But I don't think it really super mattered, because I could just levitate it myself. Question, what is your favorite D&D monster that you could base a campaign around, dragons, undead, etc.? The first campaign I ever ran was off of, like, Shadowfell and Undead, because of course it was. And the second campaign that I was doing was based around humans, celestials, and like the holy thing. So basically I went with like the super evil side of things, then I went with the super good things side of things. I feel like for me, really good fun villains to make. And by the way, just so you guys know, next week I'm actually having a video that I'm releasing that's talking about the creation of villains for D&D campaigns. And I don't talk about like just narratively speaking and like wishy-washy stuff like that. I give you guys like solid archetypes that I say that these are mechanically how these characters work. And then narratively speaking, here's exactly what you need to be able to answer for your character in order to be able to make, like, come up with an idea, go like, hey, I know what character I want. Let's fill in these blanks. Now we know what our villain is doing. And then we pick an archetype so we know how our villain operates. And then there you go. You have basically the entire foundation of your character minus any narrative that you want to tie into a story, which is entirely up to you. Because that is the one thing I will never do as a DM, and as I will never tell you how to roleplay or your campaign or do your narrative for you. Because that is absurd. Why would I tell you how to do that? Because you're going to do whatever you want, and you should be allowed to do whatever you want. But when it comes to at least the mechanical side of things, I can at least help you go like, hey, here's like a really short condensed checklist to go with that, and that's how you can do that there. Hopefully you guys like that video. I'm really stressed about it because I don't know if people are going to like it, but I really, really hope you do. But when it comes to creating a campaign around that, because I had to come up with some concepts when I was thinking about that video, part of me is like, it'd be really fun to go like, have like, there's always like the giant monsters that you want to have that become a threat to your campaign. But the thing is, you want to make it a relatable character that your players can interact with to make it a long-term, like lasting campaign that's interesting. So I find like mages as humans are really good at doing that. Whether or not they're humans, like humanoid is what I mean. So small scaled down mages are usually very fun villains to have because they have access to magic and usually lots of minions, which make for a really good and interesting campaign. The main thing that makes it really interesting beyond that is you want to pick like a really good motivation for why your villain is a villain and what he's doing and make him like really conniving. Because there's one character I talked about recently when I said, hey, I'm considering the idea of maybe my next campaign being based around this one individual who's basically a psychopath, and his one thing that he wants to do, or his one quirk about it that makes him into a terrible villain, is that every time he sees something full of potential that is beautiful or is basically on the rise within life, he wants to ruin it. And he gets like, he basically like, you see a beautiful woman, he wants to mutilate her into an ugly, like barely alive person. When he meets a young adventurer who's like aspiring and like gaining like great wealth for themselves, he wants to break their legs so they can never do that ever again. Like that's the kind of villain I'm like debating having be like this really like subtle background villain who slowly appears over the course of the campaign, who just slowly grows in power like ahead of the players and slowly escalates his scope of his vision because he's slowly getting more and more crazy as he begins to get a wider breadth of perception of the world. He starts to realize all these things he never knows before that are all these like hugely beneficial and full of potential and beautiful things in the world, and he has this huge terrible compulsion to ruin it. And because he has that, he can easily apply that motivation back towards the players, which gives them a huge amount to be able to go off of going like, wow, we've interacted with this villain, he took one look at me, and he did something absolutely terribly detrimental to my character, or he made me hate my character in a way that like really motivates the players to want to challenge him and stop him for what he's doing. That's it. There's a lot of things that you could do with it. That's not my favorite. That's just one idea that I've had right now. For me, I like the extremes. Like I've done extreme good and extreme evil. Like lawful good characters as villains, I think is extremely fun. And lawful evil and chaotic evil, I think are also extremely fun to have as well. When you get like the middle ground, like the weird neutrals or like the true neutral villain, like it becomes a bit harder to justify that. But if you wanted to have like a weird true neutral villain, like Entropy is a really fun way to do a true neutral villain, like a character who believes that there is like, they have like desensitization with the world where they go like, okay, this world that I live in, nothing in it feels real. I can't feel any like emotion or joy or happiness or sadness. I don't feel pain or anything like that. And they believe that the world would simply be a better place if all of the pain and emotion that he sees within everybody else is simply removed. You could say that's almost lawful, but with it being like he's motivated by no particular goal, it's just simply he's being this weird, cruel person that's just reducing everything down to this singular decimal point that life is basically like, it's almost like the WoW from Soma, where the WoW was like an AI bioengineer, and what it ended up doing was that it ended up infecting and like conjoining with the people of this the facility. And what it was doing is it was suspending them in a state of animation where basically they weren't alive, or they were alive, but they weren't able to do anything. They were basically like brain dead, kept alive by a machine. They were just lying there being pumped full of life, and they could do nothing more than maybe like look out their eyes and talk. But beyond that, they were just like sitting there in constant, like, mild discomfort for the rest of their existence until the WoW was destroyed. But yeah, like, that's a fun way to do, like, neutral evil that gets on the creep factor a whole lot. That's kind of like, almost like Lovecraftian horror. You believe you can only move up and down while you're moving and levitate? Actually, that'd be really good for me. Holy heck, am I actually silly? When it said you can move it up to 20 feet, I didn't realize that it actually was restricted to just up. I guess that it makes a good sense why flying then is actually a 3rd level spell. Wow. I guess that means that the ascended step for Warlock is a lot less useful than I thought. That's so weird. I genuinely thought you could move horizontally as well. It says it rises vertically up to 20 feet, so you can't go higher than 20 feet. If you are the target, you can move up and down as part of the move. Otherwise, you can use your action to move the target. Oh, that's if you are the target versus if you're not the target. Damn, I genuinely thought you could move it around. Goes to show the fact that, like I said, the one thing that I am weakest on when it comes to being a DM is spells. To be fair, that the way that spells work, especially in conjunction with other spells and other abilities, is really hard to keep track of. And it took me about 2 years of playing D&D before I actually fully understood the mechanics of spellcasting and how they were supposed to work. Like, a lot of people didn't understand for the longest time that, like, there is no restriction on casting multiple leveled spells on a turn if you use Action Surge, because you just need to have an action. And I was like, huh, funny. The only restriction that comes into place, and this is why I hate this rule, is with a bonus action casting of a spell, because if you bonus action cast a spell, it does not matter if you have another action or multiple actions. The only other thing you can cast is a cantrip then, which I think is really, really restrictive and stupid and inconsistent with the rest of the rules of multiple spell casting. Question, what are your thoughts on recurring rival parties that work against the players at various points of the campaign? I think they're great. I think they're absolutely something you can do. I've done it for a one-shot that I had. I've mentioned it before. I had a knockoff Davrian Luceren that was basically a rival party to the players, and they hated him so much they shot him in both knees. I think for the most part, don't make them villains, but make them like antagonistic forces that they butt heads with. Basically rival them with characters like Blue from Pokemon, where they appear throughout the adventure and they're usually one step ahead or on their tail, and it becomes a essence of, like, usually they're directly competing with the, either against or for the objective that you're going for, and you're trying to beat them to the punch. And it makes for a really good essence of pressure and time, because then you know that there's something proactive you're working against and you're relatable to. It's not like going like, hey, we have this villain, we don't necessarily know what he's doing, or we know what he's doing, we have no idea what he's doing to go along with it. When it's a rival party, you're kind of more down to reality. You know, like, hey, if it takes us this long to be able to do this thing, it's probably going to be them doing as well. We have no idea how quickly they're going to try and do it, or if they have any shortcuts to get around us. It also means that you can work proactively to, like, slow them down and debilitate them, and not just solve your problem by saying, like, oh, rival party, okay, murder hobo them. You could, but you can have a more interesting dynamic beyond that. Yeah, the speed would be slow as heck because of that, but I mean, like, basically at 3rd level you get fly, so if you really, really cared that much, then you can do it that way. Alright, so now that I've just taken a look through here, actually, we're coming close to the end of the live stream. So if anybody has any last minute questions they want to get out beforehand, just ask them out now in chat, and I will get to them right away. Yeah, that makes me feel incredibly stupid, actually, that I didn't realize that. I thought it was just the fact that you could only move it up to 20 feet, but I didn't believe it was locked in direction. That's actually, like, it reminds me of a misconception that I saw in the Dungeon Dudes video, which, of course, I mentioned before, I watch them all the time, that they talked about telekinetic, that new feat in Tasha's, and they mentioned the fact that, you know, it's a bonus action for a mage to be able to move a target 5 feet, and they could use it to constantly knock them back into their AoE spells. But the thing is, and I noticed it when I was doing it in my video for it, is that they made it sound a lot more useful than it actually was, because you can only move creatures toward or away from you. You can't move them left or right, which means if they step to the side, you have to move yourself in order to be able to push them back in, which you can do. But the one thing I thought was kind of annoying is that it's not as like easy as they said, where it's like, oh, you want to be able to like just like knock them off of a cliff. It's like, yeah, that's actually kind of hard, especially if you're on the cliff side with them, because you have to position yourself parallel to it and actually push them off. Or, you know, otherwise you're standing off the edge of the cliff already and you're pulling them off. But yeah, it's like every DM of any level of experience is going to misread one tiny thing somewhere, and they'll be like, oh, right, yeah, never mind. Then they just change it from that point on. At least that's the way I like to deal with it, because everybody says the same thing. You make a mistake in a ruling, you just rectify it between sessions, and you just deal with it from that point on. It's a little bit easier when it's dealt with that way than like something you've let be a long-term problem. I will admit, like, for example, one of my players tried to use Polymorph to change into a Beholder at one point during the 120 campaign. I was like, Beholder's not a beast, and they thought that like they could just shape change into any monster that they want. I was like, no, only beasts, and they were like, oh, never mind then. And I was like, yeah, imagine that. I mean, True Polymorph allows you to do that, but that's a 9th level spell. That makes sense. Just normal Polymorph? Man, could you imagine you could Polymorph into literally anything as a 4th level spell? That'd be stupid. Question, when do we get more Coco? Here's the thing. I went around and asked people in my Discord and said to them, like, because people really like the dynamic story between, or the dynamics and the story between Davrian and Coco, I said to them, would you guys care if I made more stories about Davrian and Coco, but they were just me coming up with stories and had nothing to do with the D&D campaign that we were part of? Because of the fact that the D&D campaign that we're in is not going to come back. Like, all the players that are a part of that are like, or at least a good number of players that are in there are gone, and the DM literally just, he can't DM for D&D anymore. Like, his life right now is in a point where, like, he literally can't. He's too busy. He can play in D&D, and he tries to, rarely, but he's just can't run it. I look at it more in the sense of, if I were to do that, people have to know I'm making up the story, because for me, like, people said to me they were okay with it. Like, they would love to have more stories about Davrian and Coco, but the thing is, to me, and the reason why I do the storytelling that I do on my channel is because they're my own personal experiences with D&D. I think making up stories about anything at all is completely pointless, because if it's not real, then why are we talking about it like D&D? It's just audiobooking then at that point. And also the fact is that, like, a lot of people as well on D&D story channels, specifically the ones that do nothing but D&D stories, typically go on like Reddit and just take someone else's story and just narrate it if it's a good story. And I think that's beyond pointless and massively lazy. Like, go play D&D, get some stories, and tell them to people. Don't just sit on your butt and take somebody else's story and tell it, especially because you don't know if that story is real. And if the legitimacy of a story is important to you, then like it should be first-hand experience that you have it with. Ultimately, like I said, like if I ended up telling stories like that, people have to be completely on board with the fact that it's going to be me making up stories about Davrian and Coco, and they have to enjoy it that way. And that's the thing. I don't know if that's, to me, that's a thing that matters to me, and that's why I haven't done that, and why all the stories I tell are specifically my own personal experiences. But if I had like literally a thrall of people come to me and say, no, it's okay, just tell us like a fun story that we want to hear, then I'll be like, okay, well, I can easily do that. I have lots of, you know, writing experience, can easily tell a good story that way. But to me, that's the whole reason why I haven't brought Coco back, and why she is not likely going to come back, unless things were to massively change and we had like a lot of people get on board with that. Because the last thing I want to do, the absolute last thing I want to do, is just go and make up stories, pretending like the campaign continued off where it went, and then having somebody call me out and prove that it's not real, and having a bunch of people get angry at me, if that mattered to them. I super don't want to do that to people. Davrian, yeah, you spelled it right, it's with the A. Meet an alternate reality where they have their memories come back slowly and fall in love all over again. I mean, like, if I was to do that, I mean, like, the ending that we all knew what was going to happen was that after Davrian got married, like, my DM said, what were you probably going to do after you got married to Coco? I said, I was going to leave. Like, screw the place that we are currently having our campaign in. I want to go, like, to a different land. And that's what Davrian was always all about, because he was always running away from his parents' cult. If he didn't kill the cult, which was likely not going to happen in that campaign, my DM said that he planned on having me directly face my mother at some point, which, you know, would have been an event, but it wouldn't have resolved in, like, killing the whole cult in itself. Davrian was going to be like, hey, I'm now married with this woman. but I still want to go and travel and see the world. And she's been stuck in this one town for her whole life. She deserves to have the opportunity. That's what she wants. And that would be what I would do. And I feel like if I were to keep telling stories based around them, it would be on after they were married, but they were traveling together away from the rest of the players in the party to other lands. Now that said, at that point, Davrin would be like a 20th level character, and Coco would be like, I don't know, like a 1st or 2nd level character at most. So like that'd be a really weird dynamic to have between two characters, with having like an end game character with a new game character. In the romance specifically, you enjoyed a lot more if it was real. Yeah, and that's why I think it's an important factor to keep in consideration for that particular story, was the fact that it was like genuinely real and happened at the table with other people around to see it, and was actually live improvised between me and the DM and a lot of things that happened there. Admittedly, and you can hear from my mod in the chat as well, the story in that campaign was a bit of a very up and down experience throughout the whole campaign. It was very inconsistent with its tones and its focuses. So that's kind of why something like that was able to happen between me and an NPC. But like, even the DM, I think for that would agree that like it was a very hard campaign to keep on rail, especially because like, as my friend mentioned, who was a player that session with me, all of our player characters had like no reason to stay together other than the fact that we just happened to be forced into this one job that was really important, and we were just trying to finish it. But basically, like, every single player character was going to be like, yep, later, and just walks their own direction after that campaign, because we had zero reason to stay together. Like, we were, like, barely friends in that campaign. It was a weird experience to be in a party where, like, everybody at the table's all friends, but all of our characters weren't friends. It was super, super strange. And as I go back over here for one last second here, a quick thank you to everybody who popped into the live stream, and all of those that are still up around there and such like that. A little bit quieter this time for the questions this time, but you still asked some very good questions I was more than happy to answer, and I was able to keep rambling on for the most part. And for those of you that are looking forward to stuff coming out on the channel, like next week, like I said, I have a video coming out on how to create villains for D&D 5e, and then the week after that, I have another subclass guide coming out as well. The long-term plans, besides, you know, more subclass guides, because they're very easy for me to be able to produce for you guys, is I have actually three story videos that are ready for me to start scripting, so I will be popping those out over the next couple of months. Like basically between now and summer. So we have lots of good stories coming up there. One of them, I will actually state, is a romance story, and it is a real romance story. It is not Davrian and Coco, but it is in my 1 to 20 campaign when I was running as DM. We did actually have, like I mentioned before, we had romances pop in there. This is one particular one that is a very good, solid romance. It was a very naturally organic one. It didn't pop up at a complete like forcefulness because the player didn't initiate it. It just naturally grew from the characters, and it had some, unlike Davrian and Coco, it actually had some real tragedy in there for a second there. So I think that you guys are really going to enjoy that one. It'll probably be just one of its own videos. It's not going to be like a multi-part video for the whole story to get it out of there, because not a whole lot happened unlike Davrian. So look forward for that when it comes out. This is why you have some characters should have at least some relation before the game. Yeah, this is my problem with having a character where I joined with another player late after the first session. So like me and the kobold character were like barely friends because he saved me from some cultists. But beyond that, I was just sort of with the party because they were all chumps and I was getting money off of them. But you guys will probably have that to look forward to with the channel the next little bit. So yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for coming by my Q&A. And